Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here,
And Blue Dragon 5.
and welcome to the show where we wax poetic about the movies we see on a month-to-month basis. It's time to crack open our
Movie
memoirs.
Bule bule.
All right, Dragon. So I gotta tell you, man, this has been a really prosperous month, and yeah, we'll just get right into it. We will start things off here with sorry, a little bit of news. All right, so Little Blue in the comments, he pretty much laid it out. We the biggest losses were indeed Donald Sutherland, Bill Cobbs, and Martin Mull.
Yep.
Dragon, the reason why I laid them out like all like that is because all three of them kind of have the same thing in common with me, where it's like I've certainly seen their faces around, I certainly know their names, but I gotta tell you, Dragon, like all three of them only have like maybe one or two things that I'm actually familiar with them, and they're not their biggest work. So I honestly don't really think I'm that qualified to talk about any one of them on like an individual level, which is kind of why I'm grouping them together like this.
What are you even talking about?
What?
What do you mean, like just grouping them together? We're gonna go through them.
Well, okay. I mean, I'm just like at the top. I'm just letting. Dragon, you're ruined. Okay, well, Dragon, basically, I don't have a lot to say about any one of them. So, Donald Sutherland, obviously, the big thing he was in, like, as far as, like, something that's really popular is Hunger Games. I like Hunger Games. Well, Dragon, I'm sorry. This month it's going to be hard for me. You're going to have to take the lead on it, Dragon. I'm sorry, because, like, I respect these people. I've seen jack shit that they've actually been in. I'm sorry.
Okay. But yes, as Tiki said, Mr. Sutherland very well loved from the Hunger Games. I've not seen the Hunger Games, so I'm going to take your word for his character being really good. He always had an air of mystique around him.
It almost kind of reminds me of sort of a Succession kind of performance.
Yeah,
just as far as like that kind of like commanding power.
I mean, the big thing, addition to Hunger Games, is he was in JFK.
Yeah, and again, that's a big movie that I have not actually seen, so I'm sorry.
I mean, look, here's the thing. With Donald Sutherland, I have more of a connection to his son than I do Donald Sutherland. But again, I respect for the man when he shows up, because again, staple of Hollywood. A lot of people love Clute. I remember him from Animal House. He's essentially the other man in Animal House, so
Togias is pointing out he had a cameo in Horrible Bosses. Yeah, folks, like, look, at the end of the day, like, all three of the people that passed here, they're big names in their own right, but unfortunately, it's just one of those things where, like, so for example, with Bill Cobb's Dragon, guess which movie I'm most familiar with Bill Cobb's from?
Night at the Museum.
Air Bud.
Oh, really?
I'm not even that big of a Night at the Museum guy, Dragon. I can't even think of his character. That's.
Oh, come on. Really?
Dragon, I've seen maybe two of the Night at the Museum movies one time a piece. I'm not that big into them.
All right.
But Air Bud is the thing I mostly know him from. And I watched Air Bud over 2 decades ago, so I can't exactly comment on him. I'm sorry, Dragon. I feel like I'm really out of my element on these deaths. I really feel bad about it.
All right. Okay, so Bill Cobbs, journeyman of an actor, acting since the 70s, quality actor. He's popped up in a lot of small roles over the years. Like, for example, he's like the judge on Rake, a show that nobody's ever watched, but a show that I like. He popped. I think one of the most recent things he popped up in going into like 2020 was he was in the last season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But again, the two main things I think about, and I think a lot of people think about with Bill Cobbs, is Oz the Great and Powerful. Played the Tinker in Oz the Great and Powerful. But the main thing is Night at the Museum. He was one of the three guards, and the three guards were played by legacy, like classic actors. You had Dick Van Dyke, you had Bill Cobbs, and you had Mickey Rooney. So that was the main staple, I think, that kind of ingratiated him there. Is just the fact that they like this kind of pool of talent for like these these guys who've been around, and more again, the bad guys of that franchise, technically. Oh.
Uh-huh.
Right. Okay, so again, of these three, though, the one that I think hit the hardest and hit the most, Martin Mull. Now, Martin Mull, you throw a dime, you've seen Martin Mull
Which
in something.
again, well, I mean, I know I've seen him in Danny Phantom, but as you know, I'm not that big of a Danny Phantom guy. I've seen like a handful of episodes.
Well, remind me, how did you feel about Clue?
Dragon, I watched it once. I liked it. I don't remember him.
Right.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay. What about Sabrina the Teenage Witch?
Never watched it. Dragon, I'm sorry.
All right.
This is the thing. These actors, I respect the hell out of them. I really do. And I feel terrible, but I genuinely have not seen anything that they've actually been in, and I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I just want to say some nice things about Martin Mull, and then we'll move on, okay? Okay. But yeah, Martin Mull, I got a lot of love for Martin Mull. I was really devastated to hear that he passed. Of all the losses we had this month, this one's the one that hit me like a gut punch. Just very nostalgic ties to the man. Because again, like growing up, I had like Nick at Night with Sabrina the Teenage Witch. So there's some Roseanne. I mean,
The
big
one thing I
one.
associate with Sabrina the Teenage Witch is the cat. I literally don't know anything else about it.
Of course,
Obviously,
the fun fact.
Melissa Joan Hart, but I don't know any of the supporting players. I vaguely remember the ants, but I couldn't tell you who any of the actresses are who play the ants.
Right. There's the funniest thing about that cat.
What?
Voice of Norm from Angry Beavers.
I do remember that. Yes.
The headiest thing when I was a kid, connecting those dots, like, oh my god, I know who that cat is. I remembered the voice, but I couldn't place it until you watch it back. Like, wait a minute, oh my god, it's the same actor. It's Nick Bakay. But yeah,
and Kobe has to point out Mr. Mom, yet another classic that I've not actually seen. You see the problem here, guys? It's all these guys are in classic movies that just happen to fly by my radar. So I'm so sorry.
Okay, well, again, just Martin Mull is what I want to highlight. Martin Mull is again comedic actor. Just the man had like a funny voice for comedy. The man like knew how to like hit his deliveries. And I've seen him in all. He's popped up in all sorts of things, going from like the biggies, like like the Roseannes of its time, Clue. Everyone, there's a lot of love for Clue because bring the board game to life, obviously. Around the holidays, Jingle All the Way. He's the radio station guy. He's the Mr. Ponytail man. Who's freaking out.
Which, I mean, that's fine, but very small role. I don't have a lot of commentary to give on it.
I know you don't have a lot of commentary to give on it. The one thing that you and I both have seen him in, though, Futile and Stupid Gesture. That was the one where he was Doug Kenny. He was the framing device for that movie, which is one of the last things that he actually popped up in. Actually, it was kind of nice and thoughtful for him, like a guy who's who's very much steeped in the world of comedy, getting to give voice to a comedy legend in an irreverent way. And I guess to round it out, along with stuff like Futile and Stupid Gesture, rarely, if ever, really, can I ever recall like Martin Mull really kind of digging deep beyond just like bringing home the funny line, actually getting some heart in there, getting some kind of less pathos, more just like kind of gravitas. And the role that I think that brought it from Martin Mull, like the role that always impresses me with the man that I geek out about. And the reason this loss hurt was Danny Phantom, was him playing Vlad Plasmius on Danny Phantom. Because that was a role that, like, when he showed up, I light up, man, because that's basically like a Ra's al Ghul kind of role. That's like, when he shows up, I geek out for Martin Mull playing that character the way I geek out for Tom Cavanaugh playing the Reverse Flash, man. I love the way he played that character. It was always a delight. So that's a fond memory I think of when I think of Martin Mull. Every time I hear the name, I think of him playing that role. So he did a great service to that show, and he will be missed.
Yeah, so Dre, I'm not gonna lie. When I look through the filmographies of these people, I fucking panicked, man, because I was like, my God, this is literally like all the blank spots that I have on my pop culture resume, just in the form of 3 legendary actors. So, folks, I'm very sorry. I feel genuinely shitty for this. I really do. It's just one of those things where the timing just did not work out for me to see these any of these movies. I'm so sorry.
No, do
Anyways,
yourself a service. Look into them a little, would you?
I'll try. I'll try.
There you go. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, next up on the docket after that painfully awkward, like almost existential crisis on my end,
All right, moving on.
we got Shrek 5. Yeah, Shrek. All right. So I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, given the big success of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. But it's nice to know that it's officially coming. It's nice to know that Eddie Murphy's in the recording booth. So we just figured we'd put this on as like okay, like 2025. I am very much looking forward to it, Dragon. I'm not gonna lie, especially if they stick to the Last Wish animation style. I think a Shrek movie in that style would be could really do some interesting stuff, could really be a game changer for the franchise.
All right, so they haven't they're not officially calling it like Shrek 5, right?
They haven't officially given it a
Okay.
title, I don't think. I
Right,
don't
but they,
I would doubt that they just go with Shrek 5, but who knows?
it's interesting that we don't even have a title yet, and it's announced for next year.
Yeah, it does seem a little soon, but they're getting the ball rolling on it. I'm sure like once we're more past the summer movie season into the fall, I'm sure we'll hear more about it, maybe see a first trailer.
All right.
Okay. All right, next up, Fantastic Four details. Dragon, all I know is that it's set in the 60s confirmed, which I am very excited about. Probably going to give us, hopefully the hope with the Fantastic Four in the 60s is it's essentially going to give us the MCU's version of The Incredibles. But Dragon, by all means, is there any other details I'm missing here from these recent announcements on Feige's end?
Well, really, just two things. One thing that was okay. So basically, Feige officially said, like a lot of people speculated if the Fantastic Four would be set in the '60s or not, and so we've confirmed it absolutely will have a 1960s setting. And the method by which we're doing that, it would seem, based on what he said, is he said it's an alternative 1960s. So that basically implies we're in a multiverse for this. Now, I think I think smart money is by the end of this movie, they're going to end up in the mainline MCU somehow, whether that's by Loki shenanigans or not, or Deadpool shenanigans, quite possibly. We're going to cross them over into the main MCU by the end of that film. Again, I don't know if we're going to do this by way of like tying them into the quantum realm, which essentially was the fill-in for the negative zone, which is a Fantastic Four thing. So, so I'm not sure by how exactly they're going to cross over, but I imagine. My logic has always been for the MCU and the Fantastic Four, the way to kind of like to basically turn them into the Fantastic Four might be they stayed in the quantum realm too long, really in the process of getting from point A to point B, either through the whole jump travel.
I mean, that would make sense considering we've already seen characters kind of like go through big swaps of time using that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always figured like there's only two ways to really do the Fantastic Four origin in the MCU, like using what's naturally there is quantum realm, or I've always being all headcanon-y, the the jump, that basically what if Earth's kind of version of the jump points, like how Earth kind of found out or kind of like discovered the jump points in space that we have for the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like that would be like in trying to get from point A to point B in milliseconds, that basically sent them through time and stuff, or basically it brings them from point A to point B.
Oh.
Which I mean we kind of suggested. Honestly, this is another thing to consider. End of the Marvels. The Marvels kind of has that rift in space, and that's entirely possible. That's how they get from point. Maybe they caused that.
True. That is true. I logically I could see that.
They could have caused that rift.
So
the other thing to mention we haven't really talked about in all the casting announcements and everything that we should mention is actually. I mean, I don't know how literally to take it, but all the cast announcements, at least for our main guys, they've been done through this really great looking concept art where they have like the
for sure.
So I would like to take it literally. That's how they're going to look, and if that's the case,
so. I mean, as of right now, we have no reason to think otherwise. And Dragon, I'm right there with you. I love the art, and I think the designs are really good. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that this movie's actually gonna deliver us a Fantastic Four movie that's actually worth a damn. So far, I would still wager to say the best Fantastic Four movie has been Rise of the Silver Surfer, and that movie is maybe like a 6 out of 10 at best. So we'll see.
I think the 60 setting is a really good idea. It would differentiate from all the other ones. And again, if I really want to take that concept art at its one, because I think it's a really good marketing thing they've been using for this movie. First off, but two, I mean, again, it has an aesthetic. It kind of puts you at ease. It gives you a really good sense of how it's going to look and feel. And again, we see assuming those are accurate, the costumes look like right off the page in a natural way.
Like very much kind of a Norman Rockwell vibe.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely Norman Rockwell. Also, one other thing. Herbie, we saw Herbie the robot in the most recent kind of like kind of thing when they basically they made the whole Feige post. They used the picture of all of them, and we saw a little robot, and that's Herbie the robot, and I think that's going to be Paul Walter Hauser.
I could see it.
Okay.
All right. Okay, Kogias says, I love the 1960s, so I hope that the film is a good period piece. Little Blue, I'll get to your Eli. I'll get to your Inside Out 2 stuff when we get to Inside Out. For a moment, I thought you meant Herbie the Love Bug. That would be a twist. That would be a real multiverse of madness.
God.
Shrek 5 could make $1 billion if all the people that make the Shrek memes check it out. Yeah, possibly. Okay, let's see. Next news item on the board, we have Andrew Stanton directing Toy Story 5, a movie nobody really wants per se, but Stanton is certainly among the best of the best when it comes to the Pixar directors. So, talent is talent in this situation, Dragon, right?
I think as the kids would say it, I stand for Stanton.
right.
But seriously, this is great news. He wrote the characters. He's even in the ones that he did not directly write. He's had like involvement. He's obviously been there during the story. So Andrew Stanton has always been involved in kind of our core Toy Story films. So this is already a smart move to make. He's an excellent director. I love him. I adore him as a writer. We've seen him direct a lot of our favorite stuff, including Better Call Saul. It's the man has good taste, to put it simply. Look, there's a best case and worst case scenario behind this. Okay, best case, they chose someone who wouldn't take on this film if he didn't have the confidence that there was a story worth telling there. So there's built-in brand confidence with Andrew Stanton, and a guy who knows what he's doing, and a man knows how to, like, the most consummate storyteller you have at Pixar, taking on Toy Story. I mean, what better marketing tool could you have? Now, worst case. Okay, worst case, Disney putting pressure on Pixar to pull out the big guns, and Andrew Stanton helping out, basically helping out to say, okay, guys, I'll direct it.
Like, if someone's got to do it, it might as well be me.
Basically, it's like, guys, I know.
Yeah, but if that's the case, at least he's going to put effort into it.
He'll put effort into it, but it's going to feel like if there's like an axe looming over the whole production of just like, hey, this better be good. We're going to drop it on you. We're going to drop it on you.
Oh, God.
That's the thing. It just feels more like a friend doing another friend a favor.
Pete Docter holding the axe?
No, Pete Docter. Pete Docter's not holding the axe. Pete Docter is like he's like the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. Like, panic. That's the thing. This is here's I'm looking in all seriousness. This is what it feels. It feels like worst case scenario. We're looking at like Pete Docter, like going to Andrew, we're really in a bind. Can you help me do this, please?
Right. Pete, I can see that.
Pete, you're my oldest friend. Of course, I'll help you.
But no, regardless, I'm certainly more excited for Toy Story 5 than I was before I heard he was directing. So that is good news in that case.
Oh yeah.
All right. Let's see. Comments on that. Kokia says, I really like the first two Toy Story films, but I have mixed feelings about the third and fourth films. Fair enough. I honestly do think that as time goes on with Toy Story 3 certainly has some of the highest highs of any Toy Story movie, but it also in some elements kind of feels like a retread of Toy Story 2. I have my reservations about how well Toy Story 3 holds up, like, on infinite rewatches, whereas I feel like the first two Toy Story movies are infinitely rewatchable. So, yeah, that's where I'll stand on that. I don't necessarily disagree with you on that hot take. Okay, next up, we got some trailers, Dragon. First off, The Eggman cometh. Robert Eggers. Yes, me and Colby, a.k.a. Peregrine, call him the Eggman. Dragon, this has been my most anticipated movie for the past, 2 years. What did you think, my friend?
Well, after seeing the trailer, because there's been a lot of hype, there's been like the big image of like Nick Holt as Nosferatu.
Uh-huh.
Not sold on it.
I mean, look, Dragon, you are definitely not Robert Eggers'
Nope.
target audience, my
Not
friend.
no not in the slightest. Not remotely. Run me. Eggers did poor things, didn't
He
he?
did The Lighthouse, The Witch, and The Northmen. So this is his fourth movie.
Okay, so different guy doing the other one. Okay, but sure. Either way, I've seen the Lighthouse, and I wasn't thrilled with that. So yeah, I'm not sold on it remotely.
Let me
Looking at
ask you
the
one thing about the trailer, all right? Like, because the one thing that I will say that as far as like a trailer goes, it's all right. Like, I'm honestly not jumping up and down with excitement just based on the trailer alone. One thing I do like about the trailer a lot, though, is the use of like it really does feel like he's going for like the shadows, and that is going to be a part of the film's visual identity, which I am very much excited about because it is kind of keeping with that classic Nosferatu style. So we got like the big shot of Nosferatu like looming, his shadow like looming over the city, and then we've got like the really creepy shot at the end of just like him in silhouette in the darkness. So shots like that kind of make me really think that Eggers is really understanding the assignment as far as what makes the original Nosferatu as iconic as it is.
okay.
All right. Colby is just like Eggman, Eggman, Eggman. Indeed. Dragon, Colby and I are clearly the target audience for this movie, and you are not. And that's
Really,
fine. That's
you don't say.
okay. All right. Another one that you might not be the target demographic for, Dragon, but it is directed by a Spider-Man director. We have Wolves. So I'm really looking forward to this one, man. It really feels like just a solid. Like, I don't think it's going to be like best of the year material, even though it was on my most anticipated list. But I think it's going to be really solid. It's nice to see George Clooney and Brad Pitt working together. Feels like one of those like kind of classic like mid-budget movies that have a really good hook of a premise and very likable actors at the center of them. So what do you think, Dragon?
Yes, honestly, when you told me about this movie, I was hearing. I thought you were talking about a different movie entirely because I've actually seen this trailer.
Oh,
You
okay,
said
okay.
you said Wolves. I was thinking like, oh man, Dave Filoni's gonna love this. But no. When you said John Watts, I should have realized. Oh, it's that movie.
Dragon, because
Yeah.
Dave Filoni is just like a huge furry that spends all his time just obsessing about wolves. That's
Well,
what Dave Filoni's day to day
well,
life is.
you joke about that, but seriously, the man is obsessed with wolves, Tiki.
All right, all
No,
right.
no. I'm seriously. If you look at like Star Wars, he's putting. Well, you saw Rebels.
Yeah,
He
I
put giant wolves
understand.
in.
Yeah, anyways.
The point, but it's a running gag. He likes wolves. Regardless, the man has other interests, but he does like wolves and he does like 10-gallon hats. So, Wolves, though, this movie, it looks really cool. There's only one aspect I'm really worried about. I'm a little worried about from the trailer. It's this the Austin Abrams character, the young guy they're disposing of.
Yeah, but we don't even really know if he's going to be with them the whole movie, though. And I think the trailer does a good job of kind of like it sells you on the basic premise, but it doesn't really like take you through the whole movie plot point by any means.
Yeah. So it's
Um,
got some nice polish to it. It's an Ocean's throwback, but very much something new. Very much kind of like a tribute to the wolf from Pulp Fiction. So that's a whole gag. That's the whole premise of the movie. It feels like it's a little nod to Harvey Keitel.
exactly,
But
yeah.
yeah, we fixtures are cool, man. It's why we love Mike. It's one of the many reasons we love Mike. We love Mike from Better Call
And let's
Saul,
be real
and
here, like just as far as like actual like true movie star coolness factor
mhm.
that still exists in Hollywood, I don't think you get much cooler than Brad Pitt and George Clooney. You just don't. It's hard to get much cooler than these two dudes.
That's true. Yeah, and
So yeah,
again,
I'm looking
again,
forward to it.
Again, Brad Pitt. I mean, I think after Bullet Train, especially, really showed, man, Brad Pitt's still got that cool factor going for him. He can make anything work.
Absolutely. I think he's coasting into his kind of like middle to late ages really, really gracefully. I'm not saying he's an old man, but he's definitely not like the world's sexiest man alive anymore, but he's still very much got it. He's very much got that charm. He's also just a more distinguished actor the older he gets. So yeah.
He's in his Keanu Sans, one could say. But well, the luggage cart gag is really funny. I love the luggage cart gag.
Kogias says SpongeBob better have a cameo in Nosferatu. Oh man,
wouldn't that be nice? It's not going to happen, but
however, what? What if Tom Kenny had a cameo in Nosferatu?
Oh my god, you'd have to tell me if that happens.
It's not going to happen, Dragon. But
just imagine this. Imagine this. The dramatic version
like Tom Kenny in full-on period garb, and he's not doing the SpongeBob voice at all.
Yeah.
But he just is like, it's Nosferatu.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna say. He's gonna be the big announce. He's gonna be the name of the movie guy. He's gonna be like, it's Nosferatu.
Okay, let's be fair. Willem Dafoe, based on the trailer, already pretty much has that role, but.
Or you have just Willem Dafoe holding a yellow kitchen sponge.
Oh my god! I'm not sure yellow kitchen sponges were around in this movie's time.
Fine, it's a kitchen sponge with the Edgar's lighting looks a little yellow. Happy?
Oh god! All right.
Or better yet, okay, let's go realistic here. Okay, the lights flicker on and off.
Oh, there we go.
Nosferatu enters a room. Or if we have like a big light switch, the hand goes out. That's his entrance. That's his entrance.
So yeah, it's like we're clearly not going to get an actual cameo by SpongeBob SquarePants, but some sort of thing that does reference the meme, whether or not it's like a Tom Kenny cameo or like some sort of scare involving the lights going on and off. That is something that realistically I am going to be looking for.
There you go.
Because let's face it, like SpongeBob has gone a long way towards keeping Nosferatu culturally relevant, like it or not.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. Colby says Filoni is in fact a wolfaboo. I had Kogi.
It scares me that Keeper Colby knows what that term is.
Well, he is a zookeeper.
Oh, right. That explains why you can't work at that one zoo anymore.
Oh my god! Wow. Okay. Colby says clearly at the end of the movie, all the characters look at the camera and relieved, say Nosferatu.
That would be great. Be awesome.
Willem Dafoe is just like Nosferatu, you scamp. All right. That was a terrible Willem Dafoe. I apologize. All right. Next up, let's see. We have The Last Dance, Venom, The Last Dance. Dragon, why don't you take the lead on this one?
So yet again, I will reiterate my stance. Amy Pascal doesn't care about Spider-Man. Let's say that. However, Venom, out of all of those, of all these terrible,
I think it's fair to say Amy Pascal at least passingly cares about Venom. Maybe not in the way that comic fans care about Venom, but like she she's got for him.
Well, yeah, that's look. This is what I'm saying: is Venom, out of all the other spinoffs, is the only viable spinoff that they've done. Period. Of any of those spinoffs, the only one that, and again. I would still kill to read what Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick's Venom script was, man. I would love to read that. I cannot find it for the life of me. But the point being, what we ended up getting, these Venom films, like each film it's like close but no cigar, but they're at least fun. There's fun to them. They're so close to like kind of cracking the code and actually a decent movie there. But it's like every time like I give them like an inch, they hang me with it,
Right.
It's just that like this movie, it's a fun fugitive adventure of the traveling Eddie Brock.
I'm not gonna lie, Dragon. The symbiote horse that got me. That is a damn good thing to put in the trailer to ensure that you are basically stuck actually having to see the movie. That is a fun ass concept.
See, that's the frustrating thing. The first Venom movie demonstrated this the best. Is that the Venom movie works as like a throwback to that early 2000s, late 90s kind of
That's
period.
basically how I view the franchise.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what they have going for me. You have stuff like the Venom horse, which works, and the whole gag with Venom is you want to see everything kind of venomized, and that's kind of a fun way of doing that. So on one hand, you have that, and that's what the franchise has been doing well, but they can, for the life of them, they can never get a plot or a villain working for them. That's the problem.
Right. And so, they had Carnage, and they pretty much just blew Carnage.
See, the problem, I keep attesting that had they put Carnage in the first Venom movie, that would have worked like gangbusters. That was the missing element. I know Carnage technically at the end of the first. You know what I mean, though. If he were the actual, because we gave Riot the forgettable, nameless, no one cares symbiote as the main villain versus the iconic symbiote everyone cares about. We're going to put in the next movie, and then we're going to take all the interesting stuff out of him. He's just, there's not going to be a second personality. It's nothing there. It's just bupkis.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this, interestingly, though, to round out presumably a trilogy, if they're smart, we're doing Planet of the Symbiotes, which has been kind of built up and was kind of teed up at the end of the previous Venom movie. Which, sadly, the best part of that entire film was the post-credit scene.
Right.
They're talking Planet of the Symbiotes, and we have Venom actually in a scene with Spider-Man on a TV.
That's as close as we're going to get, probably.
Isn't that sad, though? In that whole second movie, the best part was just Venom.
That whole second movie is such a blur to me, Dragon. It really is just a blur.
But it's just so sad and desperate when I have to realize that, again, just him saying, that guy. That is the coolest thing in that movie. Anyway,
really quick, I will give some shout out to the dance scene with Mrs. Chen in Vegas. I think that looks stylistically
I love that Mrs. Chen's back, so that's what I'm saying. I have nothing against that. The dancing, the Mrs. Chen. Here's what
I don't know. I honestly think Mrs. Chen is maybe the best standalone character that this franchise is.
Yeah,
even better than Venom himself. Just on the basis of Venom himself could be more comic accurate, could be more brutal. They've basically turned him into kind of a joke. But Mrs. Chen has just been solid all the way around throughout all of her appearances.
She's great. Mm-hmm. But again, here's my problem. Here's the problem area. Here's where it's oh man, I was on principle, I was you know what? I'd see Venom 3, and then I saw this trailer. Now I have to think about it, because at the same time we're doing the Venom staples that are at least entertaining.
Oh yeah.
Chiwetel Ejiofor. He's in this movie. He has no business being in this movie. Of all the actors out there, why did we get the Doctor Strange guy to be in this movie?
Oh, God.
Not only that, we're going to put our MCU actor.
Dragon, have you heard the rumor of who Rhys Ifans is going to play?
Are you saying it's not going to be Kurt Connors?
No, it's not Kurt Connors. It's another famous Spider-Man character.
Oh my God. Who do they think it's going to be?
So in the trailer, we see a clip of him and his wife and a small child, and they're all in a van together, playing an instrument. We see that one quick shot.
Yeah.
Dragon, the theory is that this is a kind of a wayward hippie version of the Parkers.
I'm sorry, what?
The Parkers, as in Ben, May, and Peter Parker.
Oh my God. Just no. Oh, that's the dumbest thing. That is the stupidest thing.
But that is the theory.
You're darn right it's not confirmed, because if they confirm that, Amy Pascal, oh my God, she's just wiping her. She's taking that Spider-Man contract to the bathroom with her, as far as I'm concerned. The
theory is basically that Venom is going to have to protect a version of Peter Parker, Terminator style.
Oh my God.
You see, I'm a little bit more into it than you are, because I honestly think at the very least it's kind of okay, it's not a good idea, but at least it's kind of okay, let's see how they fuck this up kind of idea.
Look, Okay, just a few things again. Chiwetel Ejiofor being in this movie, and not only is he in this movie, just in the little clip that we introduced with him in the trailer, is him, this MC, this actor who is not, there's not like a bit part in the MCU. No, he was a villain and a supporting character in the MCU.
Uh-huh.
Who's like basically, hey, remember the really cool, like, we've introduced symbiote into the MCU? Nope, not anymore. He's there in that scene, and he nips that in the bud. So just again, this is that scene right there, that little moment. That's what made through any credit I gave Amy Pascal for Venom. It's like, yep, doesn't care about Spider-Man. Just like any potential, chucked it out the window.
Kokias, I think the rumor is that it's not going to be the Adam Scott version of Ben Parker. It's going to be yet another like multi-dimensional version of the Parkers.
Look, if they're gonna look, I'm introducing Spider-Man into a Venom movie again. While it's a little late for that, still would definitely be a benefit. Would definitely be something they could do, and I'd be on board for. Problem, okay. Again, like doing this like protecting the younger version of Peter Parker. Like, we are doing Sony. You own Spider-Man. We're painfully aware you own Spider-Man. Seemingly the only thing you can do with Spider-Man now is animation with Spider-Man. But it's just the fact that, like, everyone...
It'd be more interesting if Venom, like, kidnapped a young version of Peter Parker.
No,
like,
there's no young version of Peter. Get rid of the young version. No!
Look, I'm saying it'd be more interesting. I'm not saying it'd still be a good idea. I'm just saying there'd at least be tension.
I'm just saying, here's something, okay? If you want something that doesn't make like 100% sense, but it would entertain people, it would be something really interesting at least. Let's pay off the Andrew Garfield thing. There's your crossover. Think about it.
Right.
No Way Home.
Right.
I haven't encountered an alien yet. Throw in Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, the Planet of the Symbiotes. There you go.
Anyway. So yeah, we're a little mixed on this movie.
God, anyways, it's mixed. Again, should be fun, but I'm gonna be enraged about this Ejiofor thing. But you know.
All right, so Dragon here. I got to admit I'm nervous about this movie just because it is Robert Zemeckis. The dude has not had a great track record. I honestly think the last movie he put out that I really thought was great was Flight, which I actually think is pretty underrated. But this looks like it has potential, especially with the Tom Hanks of it all. And I do think that, generally speaking, it's a very well-constructed trailer. So what do you think?
Oh yeah, I'm very sold on it. Zemeckis, using the de-aging tech and on Tom Hanks and Robert, but not just de-aging, he's aging them all over the place. Now, what's really, I really hope the trailer is accurate in what they're showing us here, because it seems like it's going to be literally locked on that one shot for the whole movie. And if that's the case, I'm going to be really impressed.
That's going to be fucking crazy.
Now, here's the thing, okay? Now, I want that to be the case. By that token, though, this is a movie that is going to, I really hope is not going to be a long movie. Movie, you don't
2 hours and 45 minutes.
But seriously, we're doing like a whole lifespan between the couple, but also the property from the looks of things, like we're seeing like from the Stone Age and everything. So
I got to admit, the Stone Age parts are the parts where it's like, oh god, that's a little pretentious. But that's the parts that worry me. If it was just the history of the house, I'd be on board. But like, we don't need to see like the history of the land before the house. But I could be wrong. It could be really interesting, but I don't know.
I think only if that's like a brief opening will that work. Okay, like a brief. I'd say like a montage of the land and then the opening, like the end of the opening.
Maybe I'm just traumatized by Sasquatch Sunset, which is seriously one of the most like utterly baffling movie-going experiences I've had all year. So the idea of seeing cavemen in a movie again isn't really the most intriguing thing in the world for me right now after that.
The point being, I think this movie has a lot in its favor. It's a fun reunion between Tom Hanks and Robin Wright.
Looks like Tom Hanks and Zemeckis as well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. All three of them worked on that movie, Tiki. So yeah, but yeah, it's going to be a nice reunion on all fronts there. But I will say there's one reservation I have. This is not a reservation that's going to nick the film, that's going to hurt the film or anything. But it's still this whole. I know you probably recognize this as well, Tiki. Suspiciously similar to the Short Circuit Disney short Cycles.
You know what? It's been a while since I've seen that. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
That is, and again, look, that's not going to really. That's just going to be
I
a thing
mean,
of like,
I see what you're saying, Dragon, but it's like, I feel like the sell on this movie is more so on the characters
yeah,
than
well,
it
of
is.
course.
I mean, the environment is definitely a big part of it, but I think the characters are going to be a much bigger part of this than that
Well, I'm
was.
just saying, it feels especially like that was the jumping off point of like the sell of the movie. Like they watch Cycles, like let's do
And
that.
they're
Let's
like,
do
hey, we could do a feature length version of this.
exactly.
I honestly, I kind of see what you're saying.
It
Yeah.
really feels. And look, to be fair, it's like Cycles is great. Cycles is wonderful. You remember you bring out the tissue, the inside out tissues. Though it's just like this is my home.
Right. Yeah.
Every time we get that. So this
And you
is
know what? The trailer does end on
mhm.
something incredibly. We used to live
that
here.
that's the thing. So look, I have a good feeling about it. I think it's going to be good. But again, if it's a
It
really long
could be
run,
Benjamin Button though. And Benjamin Button, I don't dislike Benjamin Button, but Benjamin Button always strikes me as a movie where it's like it was a really, really interesting idea, but it got a little bit too ambitious and pretentious for its own good with the final product.
look, I'm going to say this about the next movie, but I think this movie especially, though, it's a movie that's going to live or die by the runtime. I think it's a good movie. It's just if this thing is like a really long Zemeckis movie, it's going to lose people, and it's going to be like people saying, "What did I sit through? I sat through Tom Hanks being adorable for like 3 hours."
You act like that's a bad thing, Dragon, you fucking monster. No, I'm kidding. I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I sat through A Man Called Otto, and that was like 100 minutes of Tom Hanks being
But that's
adorable.
the thing where it's like, look, we all love Tom
right.
Hanks. It's a war crime to dislike Tom Hanks. We all know this. But it's just the thing of like, look, I like this. I can enjoy this, but it's just the thing of like for people to go out to the theater, it's like we can't keep feeding the machine of like make all the movies long as possible. That'll bring the kids to the theater again.
Yeah, we'll see. But I do think that the next movie, Red One, I think there's probably a more so. Do you think that this movie's going to live and die on if it's 2 hours? Do you think that's going to be too long?
Yeah, so
For it?
that's what I was. This is the one I was mainly using the whole. It's going to live or die by the runtime thing for. This movie, I've anticipated
If
this
it's
movie.
2 hours, that's just going to be too much.
I think. Let me just wait. If it's over 2 hours, it's dead. It's not going to end well. Okay. If
I
it's
feel
two
that,
hours,
yeah.
it had better be really good. I think if they're smart, hour 40 minutes, hour and a half would be in. It's an impossible dream these days. They're never going to do hour and a half again. But still, just like hour 40 minutes.
I dream a dream of 90 minutes.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's 90 minutes would be like, man, that's what we. It'd be if you can just get your story that strong and that like all the necessary parts are there and we have everything that we need without being a little over 90
Was
minutes would be
Spirited
impressive.
like 2 hours? Because that's about the closest comparison I would have to this movie.
I don't.
But then again, Spirited was a musical, and just
Yeah.
being a musical by its nature kind of adds to the runtime.
So that's the thing. Look, I'm not saying 2 hours is necessarily a kiss of death, but I can see. I think technically it's an Amazon production. Amazon Productions, the way they work, if they have a long runtime, you end up with the Eddie Murphy Christmas movie. You end up with with that one.
All right, well, anyways, you want to set up the premise for this?
Yeah. So I was anticipating this one. They delayed it because of the strike and everything from last year, which bummed me out. So the premise of this was J.K. Simmons is playing Santa Claus in live action this time. He's a buff, cool-looking Santa. You got a nice vibe going on there. The Rock is basically his head elf, which is really funny when you think about it. Just the Rock being a happy little elf.
It's basically the Rock back in Tooth Fairy mode, which I don't necessarily not vibe with, honestly. I feel like it's a slightly different mode for him. It's still very much the Rock, and he's still just playing the Rock, but it's a slightly different version of the Rock that we haven't seen in a minute.
Right. So basically, Santa is kidnapped. It's up to the head elf to save him, but he needs the help of basically like a tracker who is Chris Evans, who's very, very cynical. And we have like him going to his awesome North Pole. We have, I believe, Lucy Liu is there, and we have Frank Grillo as like a awesome looking polar bear.
The polar bear is honestly kind of the selling point of the whole movie for me.
That's what I mean.
I'm a
So
sucker for a good polar bear.
This looks like a great action movie around the holidays. And Tiki, I have I have a thing where I love like doing like not I'm not somebody like doing necessarily like Die Hard like just an action movie set at Christmas. I mean, if we can do like an
No, I know
actual
what you mean
holiday
though.
themed
Like
like
the freaking what was the one from a couple years ago with David Harbour?
right, that's Violent Night.
Violent Night. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yes, I mean I like like Violent Night, and honestly, just boiling it down, just look at like the third act of the Fairly Odd Parents Christmas episode, where it's like kind of like an action sequence at the North Pole. It's like there's something inherently cool about Santa, like of our Santa figures, or at least the people involved in the Santa kind of our North Pole setting, kind of in an action setting, kind of an action situation.
Gilbert
It's just
no less.
yeah, I mean you got that too. Anyway, well no, that was Billy and Mandy.
Oh shit! I'm sorry. You're right. Oh god, my bad. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I thought you were kind of referencing another Santa as well, but that was a vampire Santa. But yeah. Anyway, this again, as I said, this movie, I like the gags, the whole toy gag. I like the like the gadgetry there. Like there's a lot going on. It's the fact that it's Chris Evans and The Rock saving Christmas. I'm there already, and then with just the sell it even more, we had awesome snowmen, like Yeti like snowman
The
monsters.
snowmen were a pretty good sell. I'm not gonna lie.
That's what I'm saying. Here's the thing. I'm looking at scenes like that. I'm like, man, this is going to be such a great movie. Then I'm seeing like there's like this little clip in the trailer where it seems like everything's a little dark, and we're seeing like The Rock being thrown around in kind of this dark setting that makes me think, oh, that might be a dragged out third act. I don't know. Like the third act action sequence where we got to save Christmas and then we're just dragging on for like an extra 20 minutes. That's what I'm afraid of. If they can circumvent that, this movie's going to be great. If not, it's going to be, well, the movie was great, and then they dragged on that climax, and that had a decent ending.
Kogia says Red One has a huge budget, so it'll likely flop. Yeah, I mean, huge, but I feel like Hollywood is hopefully kind of learning the lesson on the budget thing. But you're not wrong about that, though. I don't necessarily think this is like a surefire smash hit or anything. It looks fun, but I don't think this is the kind of movie that's just like everyone's going to look at it and see like, oh my god, I have to see that. Colby says it should be 15 hours long and go into excruciating detail. He could be talking about either here or the the Red One. Well, Nosferatu should be 15 hours long and go to excruciating detail. All right. Let's see. And finally, Dragon, we have something that I'm sure you're very excited about. You want to take the lead on it?
Yes. Batman Caped Crusader. We finally got the trailer for this. It's coming top of August. Love the period setting. Again, we have we have Bruce Timm, we have Ed Brubaker, and we have sorry, I think I said Ed Brubaker. I think Greg. I forget if it's Greg Ruck or Ed Brubaker. I can't remember who's writing on this. But it also J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves. Like I have a lot of Batman talent. Well, with the exception of Abrams, Batman talent working on this. There's only one aspect I'm worried about. I'm worried about Harley Quinn in this show. For two reasons. Okay, one, we seem to be making the smart choice to avoid Joker. Which we did. The Joker's obviously he's the go-to. It's the end-all, be-all. It's very much kind of like it's the other half of Batman. We need the Joker, but by the same token, though, it's like it feels like if the show is good enough to warrant a second season, much like we've seen even like some of the Christopher Nolan films, the sequel is where you can introduce the Joker once you've invested in the Batman. Now, with that in mind, you have to wonder, do we really want to? It feels always really feels weird if we get a Harley Quinn not connected to the Joker, which is what we're getting here. The big reservation I have is Harley Quinn without Paul Dini's involvement, which is never. It's not like a disqualifier, but it's just the fact we've seen Bruce Timm do stuff with Harley Quinn without Paul Dini, and it hasn't been good. So that is my one. Has everything? I'm not even saying it's gonna be like everything looks bad about what they're doing with Harley Quinn. I think she might be Asian in this version. Like that's not the problem. It's like aesthetically, I don't like the look of this Harley Quinn. But it sounds like we're connecting her with Renee Montoya.
I like the fact that she looks different. At least, honestly, to me, that's kind of a draw.
Yeah, it's not a terrible look. It's just weird. It's just something to get used to. That's not like the instant like turn off for this version of Harley Quinn. It's just I don't know. It sounds like they're making her like an anti-hero vigilante kind of thing. Like it just doesn't really feel clown-like to me. It doesn't really feel like it feels like we're flying in the face of kind of like the silly fun component of the character, which kind of feels like it just feels like Harley Quinn's out of place in this show if we don't have a Joker to really set her up.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I could be wrong. They'd be going somewhere with it. She's going to be they're going to have like, it sounds like they're going to do an
what
idea.
They could do is they could just have like one episode that has the Joker in flashbacks or something.
Well, yeah, but it really feels like we're not getting Joker at all in this first season, which, I mean, we could. I mean, we've seen Matt Reeves likes to tee up the Joker a little bit, very much.
Yes. It
is possible. But I don't know. The vibe, the thing I've heard about this take on Harley Quinn, last thing we'll move on, is that it's something that I've always wanted to see with Harley Quinn. The idea Harley has like kind of like a Harvey Dent role in that she is it sounds like she and Montoya are going to be in a relationship, and the idea is like Montoya tips her off, and then Harley Quinn, like Dr. Quinzel, will then, as a vigilante, like, help the wheels of justice, or vice versa. Like Harley Quinn has patients who are the criminal elite of Gotham, and she will leak this information to Renee Montoya, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, see, that actually sounds interesting to me because it's almost like a twisted Gordon dynamic.
I know, that's the thing. So I've always wanted to see that kind of thing with Harley Quinn and like an alternative Batman, which we kind of got in the White Knight story that Sean Murphy did. So I was really happy to see that. So I'm not opposed to this, but it's just going to be weird seeing it that potentially disconnected with the Joker. And I don't know.
I'm basically going at this like looking at it is almost like kind of like a fresh start, like essentially like if the idea behind like All-Star Batman was actually good, of just like giving people a jumping off point into the universe where they don't need to know any of the continuity. It's like a fresh take on the character, but obviously using a similar style and aesthetic and getting kind of like some of the old guard of the writers, Bruce Timm in particular. So obviously I'm not as hardcore into Batman as you are, but we have pretty much finished out the Batcave for the most part, with a few exceptions. And so I am looking forward to this. This isn't like a huge event in my year, but it's definitely something I'm going to check out.
Look, all I'm saying is, like, I think, look, it could, I hope it works. Like, the Harley, that's the only reservation I have, and even the only reason I have that reservation is because we've seen what happens when Dini isn't there around Bruce Timm to write Harley Quinn. That's the only reason I hesitate.
I mean, Dragon, I don't think they're going to fuck it up like the example you're thinking of.
I know that, but I'm just saying, but you see what I mean? It's the fact, like, Dini has a special way with that character. But
yeah, I hear you, but at the same time, I don't like the idea of, like, one person having sole ownership of a character. So
I know, but to Bruce Timm's credit, and what I'm really looking forward to here, the whole vibe we're getting from everything else in this is that it feels like
I don't necessarily want Harley to have like a ton of focus, just because I feel like between the movies and having her own TV show and everything, I feel like she's already gotten a huge amount of attention. So I would be fine with her being like a lower tier supporting character in this, at least in the first season, only popping up every once in a while. That's kind of what I'm hoping for, honestly.
Well, I mean, look, overall, the thing I'm looking forward to with this is it feels like Bruce Timm's revisiting the stuff he wasn't able to do on Batman the Animated Series, because we're having this vampire character in the show that Bruce Timm wanted to put on Batman the Animated Series, but he couldn't because of the censors. Like the one of the very few censorships they had on Batman the Animated Series was you can't do vampires. So they're going to have a character like that. And there's going to be, a few other things too. Like one of the things I'm looking forward to, I love Onomatopoeia. He's in this. I can't wait to see that. Anyway, so I think it looks good. I'm looking very forward to it. We'll see how Harley Quinn turns out. It's going to be different. There's nothing wrong with it being different. And Dean doesn't have to have autonomy over that character, but just saying.
All right. Kogia says it looks like Nightwing won't be in the cartoon series, so we don't have to worry about repeating the mistakes for Batman and Harley Quinn.
True.
I mean, Nightwing was one of the most egregious mistakes. It wasn't the most memorable bad thing in that movie, but...
Tiki, I just want to make sure you
know. Okay. Fuck off! We don't have time for that, Dragon. I know what you're going to do. Yes, DG equals Dick Grayson. I get it. All right.
Okay, good. And Dick Grayson is?
Nightwing.
There you go. He
All
got
right.
he got it, folks. He remembered.
So, Dragon, I do want to acknowledge this. I did bring it up with you. You legitimately didn't think it was real. Did you look up the Pharrell Lego trailer?
Well, no, because you said we weren't talking about it.
Look, folks, we had a really crowded news month, but the Pharrell trailer does look legitimately insane. It's a bonkers idea. I'm honestly like I'll probably I might not see it in theaters. I'll definitely check it out on Max out of curiosity. So yeah. All right, and Dragon, with that, let's make our next transition. And let's go ahead and go into the June 2024 movies. Okay. So we can start with Inside Out 2. Not a lot to say about this that we haven't already said. My basic take on it is that I don't quite think it reaches the emotional heights of the first movie, but I think as far as creativity and the use of characters, it might be even better than the first movie. If the first movie is a 10 out of 10, this is easily like an 8 out of 10. Very solid Pixar sequel. Not quite as much of an emotional gut punch as the first movie was, but I kind of respect the fact that the movie wasn't really trying to be an emotional gut punch. Dragon?
Yeah, so Kelsey Mann's feature debut, I think, went off really well. It's good sequel. As always with Inside Out, my favorite aspect is the causal relationship between the emotions and Riley. Like you don't know who's leading who there. Like again, like the emotions are doing things they don't fully understand because that's what the girl is kind of like willing them to do. And of course, the emotions are in control of the girl. So I've always loved that, and we do that to a T here, which is kind of what I was looking for. The storytelling was very tight knit, very good, especially with anxiety. All the stuff we did with anxiety.
Oh,
I
anxiety was easily the best part of the movie. Yeah.
Again, I concur with Tiki. I don't think it's the instant classic the first Inside Out was, but it's a very serviceable, very well done sequel. That very easily could have, it could have been a cash in. It could have just been like, well, let's do it again. Like we're gonna do the other characters. No, we're gonna do a Riley again. Like really, we're just gonna like go the next year with Riley. How many of these movies are we gonna do until she's in the retirement home? Like you never know. But it's yeah, this is this was again, it's Pixar doing what I love them for. They're making a quality story. They put money on the table and they end up cleaning up, which is how I like it.
Alrighty. Okay, so next up we have Hitman. I assume you watched this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, delightful movie, right? I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Glenn Powell is really proving himself as a genuine movie star. I think this movie's paced really well. I think it's got a lot. It's just very watchable, very charming. I honestly have no real notes about it. I just think it's honestly one of the most consistently entertaining movies of the year for me.
Yeah. So apparently this was based off an article. As we kind of see by the end of the movie, there's kind of a biopic element to it, at least to some degree. I really liked it. This is Richard Linklater did this, the guy behind Slacker and School of Rock.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's probably one of the best Linklater movies in a while, I think.
Yeah, I think I love this fun take on the Hitman and how it's like completely different from any other Hitman movie you've ever seen. I love the whole in real life, like the entrapment ploy of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the whole how we sensationalize it in the media. And of course, one of the funniest little Easter eggs is they had a clip from Barry.
Yes, of course.
That's a pretty good episode from Barry too. It's the third episode.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so Glenn Powell, he's great. I got to admit, funny thing about Glenn Powell, I wonder if you had this. I assume you haven't forgotten about him entirely. Glenn Powell, very, very almost identical in look and in voice and I guess impressionistic ability to Jamie Costa.
Yeah, a little bit. I could see that.
I can imagine if I were Jamie Costa watching this movie, like, man, I could have done that.
Right.
But there was like the one that was like mildly distracting. Like, man, he looks so much like Jamie Costa. That's crazy.
Honestly, for me, he's always been like kind of like a Josh Holloway type. Not sure if you know who that is. He's a Lost guy.
It's always funny. He always reminded me of the actor who played Simpson from Jessica Jones from the Top Gun movie.
Oh, I could see that too. Yeah,
like the way he looks in that Top Gun movie looks a lot like he's that character.
He's a lot more charismatic than that actor in the Top Gun movie, but yeah.
Oh, sure. Anyway, a lot of people, because they really loved him in the range that he displayed in this movie, a lot of people have been saying Glenn Powell for Batman for Brave and the Bold.
I don't know. I mean, maybe.
I'm just saying that's just like the popularity trend of like, hey, everyone's talking about Glenn Powell. He could be Batman, couldn't he?
Right. I don't necessarily buy into the whole like, hey, he's the next big thing. He's Batman. Like,
yeah, we can't make everything.
Like, I would like to see him in a more dramatic role, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I feel like right now, like as good as he is, he has just been kind of coasting off of his charisma. I'd like to see him in a role that really challenges him.
Well, anyway, so I really dig the unconventional. I want to highlight this. I love the unconventional love story in this film. I love how Linklater does the romance aspect, like it's something actually real and palpable. However, I will say I think the one minor flaw I have with this is not a flaw in that I don't enjoy. This is a flaw I can imagine an audience might have. We linger on the romance maybe a little longer than we should. Like it kind of like in the middle, like it's like.
It does lull in the middle a little bit. I will say that. Yeah,
I like that relationship. I don't mind seeing it, but it feels like it
kind of feels like the plot is put on pause for like 10 minutes or so while we're developing that. Yeah, it's
a nice pause. I mean, given the content, it's kind of a Skinamax pause, but it's a nice pause.
And also, I do think, given what does happen, as the movie goes towards the climax, it is pretty important to set up just how meaningful that relationship is to him.
Yeah.
So
the payoff.
Once I found out where the movie was leading, it didn't really bother me.
Yeah, honestly. That's exactly because the payoff is great. It ends rather well without saying it all what happens. I recommend people check it out. So Hitman was very good. Also, I was very delighted to see Retta pop up, and Retta is basically one of the undercover officers. She's the female undercover undercover hitman. Person. Of course, Retta from Good Girls, the show I keep telling you about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty. Next up, we have, for me, A Quiet Place, Day One. Dragon, this is a movie where I'm going back and forth on it a little bit for me, honestly. When I first saw it, I really loved it, but at the same time, it was always, like, even from the first viewing, it was always... okay, that was really solid. Probably my third favorite in the Quiet Place franchise, but still really, really solid. The one thing I think this movie really has going for it has two things really going for it, actually. Number one, Lupita Nyong'o, Joseph Quinn, a.k.a. Eddie Munson, they're both great. Their performances are just impeccable, just no notes. They're awesome. They carry the movie. And the production design in this film is honestly pretty staggering. I'm kind of surprised that more people aren't talking about it. I'm going to go as far as to say that I think the production design in this movie might be some of the most impressive, like, destruction set pieces, physical destruction set pieces that I've seen since something like Spielberg's War of the Worlds, which is pretty high praise, I think. Unfortunately, Dragon, the more I think about this movie, I do really respect the fact that it's a very personal story. Essentially, Lupita Nyong'o's character has cancer, like terminal cancer, which is not something that the trailers really advertise, and that's kind of become a little bit divisive. I personally like it because I think it gives like an interesting dynamic to the idea of a post-apocalypse. Like, what does a post-apocalypse look like to a person who, at this point, has already kind of given up on the idea of having a future? I honestly think that's a really good sell. Unfortunately, I think for me, the biggest issue with this movie is the fact that we get approximately about like 3 minutes of the actual actual chaos of like when shit hits the fan and nobody knows what to do and nobody knows that they have to be quiet. And then guess what happens, Dragon? Lupita Nyong'o's character gets knocked out. She wakes up in a church. You got Janmon Hansu's character, and he's already shushing her. And Dragon, we just yada yada right the fuck past what was literally the big selling point of this movie. And that, honestly, the more I think about it, really pisses me off. It's like I'm so mixed on this though, because I do genuinely think that the actual like human drama at play here is compelling. But like as a Quiet Place prequel, I genuinely think that just the 10-minute opening that we get in A Quiet Place Part 2 is a lot more compelling than this, just by and large. And while I do think that there are a couple decent set pieces here, I definitely think that out of the franchise, this is the movie where, again, it makes sense because it's being done by the guy who did Pig. And I do think this is one of those cases where it's like they got someone who's very much an art house director, and he's essentially making an art house movie out of a franchise. I'm just not sure if A Quiet Place was the one to do it with. As much as I do think this movie does work as like an art house horror movie, it just feels like the premise. This movie really just should have been a lot more intense than it actually ended up being, and that's really where I'm hung up on it. So yeah, ultimately more of a mixed bag than I was hoping for. I'd still give it a recommend, but with the asterisk that that I think it's definitely, while still a really good movie, probably still an 8 out of 10 in its own right, just based on the strength of stuff like the performances and the set design and everything. It's still, like, by far the weakest of the Quiet Place franchise. Colby says, I kind of want to see a Quiet Place prequel focused on real government, learning about and reacting to it, think Arrival, but horror. Yeah, I don't know, man. That would be interesting. My whole thing with, like, the prequel territory, though, is I just, at this point, especially after seeing Quiet Place Day 1, I don't think we're going to top what we saw in Quiet Place Part 2 with that prologue. I just don't think we're going to top that. And so I think we need to move forward. I do think that having Joseph Quinn there in that island colony that does pop up in Part 2, I'm really looking forward to seeing Joseph Quinn's character eventually meet up with the Abbott family in a potential Quiet Place Part 3. I do think this movie did accomplish some interesting bits of world building, specifically with how the creatures move in herds and how that works. But yeah, man, just as far as like the actual premise of like, okay, it's day 1 and shit's hit the fan and nobody knows what to do. The movie yada yada's over that element pretty quickly, and that's pretty disappointing. All right, so Dragon, tell me about Bratz. It's is it a movie about the dolls with a passion for fashion?
No.
Not those Bratz.
No, the other Brats. No. Yeah, this is about the Brat, essentially about the Brat Pack.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, so this is a solid documentary by Andrew McCarthy, basically kind of about he and his friend group. So yeah, it's an examination of the Brat Pack in the '80s. Majority of it being the Breakfast Club, but also like St. Elmo's Fire, and just like basically like the '80s kind of like like the up and coming kind of star, the young youthful kind of stars of the '80s. Basically, like the idea of put in Hollywood standards, you had the Rat Pack, which of course is Sinatra and Company, like the big guys going about the town, and basically you had like the kids from the Breakfast Club and these '80s John Hughes movies and John Hughes adjacent films being given a title like that, but against their will, like a name that they didn't like pick, and they were labeled by that, and they were kind of stuck with that label, which that they really felt put them in a box career wise for them.
Uh-huh.
And that's what this is about. Andrew McCarthy saying, like, he gets the kind of examines like the origin of it, and he kind of talks to his old pals, like the ones that are willing to kind of in like a therapeutic way, just kind of talk about how it made him feel. In brutal honesty, it's a very 1%er documentary. It is. It's very much like, okay, so you were called the Brat Pack.
Right.
Admittedly, yes, it's like, oh yes, I'm sorry, Andrew McCarthy, you're crying into your your convention appearance money. But it's still, though, it is a nice examination of that phenomenon, like the power of a name and how it does. Like everyone just kind of looks at him like, hey, if you're an actor trying to make it, and it's like, oh yeah, you're from the Brat Pack, right? You only want like the young John Hughes movies. Of course, youth only lasts so long, so where are we gonna go after that?
Oh,
So it's I think it's worth a watch. I think you'd like it, Tiki. But yeah, it's nice. It's on Hulu, so
I still need to catch up on the Jim Henson documentary. I didn't get around to that.
well
But yeah, I'll
yeah,
check it out at some point.
right, okay.
Okay, next up we have Thelma. Dragon, do you know anything about this movie at all?
Is it like is an alternative like what if Thelma from Thelma and Louise survived?
No, not even close. All right.
I know. I'm just judging by the poster. I don't know.
So, Dragon, we have June Squibb, who was
Yeah.
recently played, a pretty pivotal, it's small role in Inside Out 2 as Nostalgia.
Yeah.
And Dragon, essentially, the idea here is, those scam calls that have been making the rounds recently for elderly people, where the piece of shit pretends to be their grandson who was in an accident.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know you're talking about, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this happens to Thelma at the start of the movie. She ends up sending $10,000 away. And Dragon, she finds out that it was a scam pretty early on. She is pissed and she is out for fucking revenge. She wants to get her money back and she's very determined to do it. But she also wants to avoid her family. And so what does she do? She literally goes to Richard Roundtree's retirement home and hijacks his fucking scooter. And so Richard Roundtree is now in on the ride. And Drake, this movie's fucking delightful. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. It's like it's got this really simple hook of like very simple stuff. Like for example, like closing a chat window or closing an ad window on a computer or navigating your way through a messy store, stuff like that. Dragon, this stuff is treated with the utmost action movie setup of like it's life or death. These people can literally fall and break their back and die. It's actually, there's some pretty poignant setup with this movie as far as like, there's like a good handful of her friends who have died just by falling and someone not being there for them. There's this whole runner where her grandson wants her to wear a life alert and she doesn't want to do it because she's just fiercely independent to a stubborn degree. Dragon, one of your favorites is in this movie, Clark Gregg as Squibb's son-in-law, and he's delightful. We have Parker Posey as the daughter. I don't know the actor who plays the grandson, but I will say that the actor that plays the grandson has a freak out in the middle of the movie because he's blaming himself for the grandmother getting lost. That Dragon, it was one of the most painful, this is literally me moments I've ever had in a movie. It was so just authentically exactly how I would react to the situation.
Yeah, I've had one of those.
Yeah. I fucking love this movie, man. Even fucking Malcolm McDowell pops up. I won't spoil how he pops up, but let's just say he has a small but pivotal role. Genuinely one of the best roles I've seen Richard Roundtree in. And of course, we just lost Richard Roundtree, so that makes it all the more poignant. You got to check this thing out, man. I highly recommend it. It's a breath of fresh air. You're in and out in 90 minutes. I honestly think it's a little less than 90 minutes. I think it's like 85 minutes or something. I could be wrong about that, but it's like 100 minutes absolute max. It's delightful. Genuinely, like, like this year, we're kind of like in a two-way battle between Challengers, and Dune Part 2 is my favorite of the year, where, Dune Part 2 is obviously like the cinematic ecstasy, one of the best movie-going experiences I've ever had in my life, especially seeing it in IMAX. But Challengers is just infinitely rewatchable. I literally just bought it digitally, which is something I almost never do. So yeah, those two are going back and forth. But I will say that this movie is definitely in contention for like the top 5 of the year so far, and it'll probably be in my top 10. I'm predicting that. And I am also very much predicting June Squibb to get a Golden Tiki nomination at the end of the year. So yeah, huge recommend on this one. Let's see. We got Monkey, who also saw this at my recommendation. He says, just realized June Squibb's starring movie was released in June. Yeah, this was the month of June, Monkey, between this and Inside Out 2. Yeah. Let's see. Colby says the grandson is apparently going to be in Gladiator 2. That's interesting. It'd certainly be a different role for him, but yeah, I really liked him though. I'm definitely interested in seeing what he does. The Monkey says he really appreciated how McDowell's character served the story. Agreed, without giving anything away. I do agree on that. Okay, moving on, Dragon. Tell us how to rob a bank.
Well, folks, I'll tell you. Yeah, it's basically this is a documentary on Netflix. It tells you basically tells you the story of the Hollywood Bandits, which essentially was this guy Scott Spurlock Scurlock. Scott Scurlock essentially was a guy called is basically a bank robber who went by the name Hollywood, because the idea is that these guys watched a lot of movies about bank robberies, and they kind of like said, well, what if we did that? And and that's the thing. So it's basically kind of shows you what goes into a bank, into a bank robbery, and like just these guys consistently getting away with it. Which I always like a good bank robbery story.
Is this based on the movie Bandits by any chance?
No.
Do you know what movie I'm talking about?
Look, there's a documentary, Tiki. So.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm wondering if the movie was based on the story.
I mean, I don't. Well, how did Bandits end?
It's been a while, but you know what movie I'm talking about, though? Bruce Willis, Billy Bob Thornton. It was literally the first movie that I'd seen Billy Bob Thornton in.
No, I didn't see Bandits, no.
I highly Bandits is really underrated, highly recommended, but I digress. It sounds very similar to Bandits as far as the concept goes.
All right, so the point being, I always find it interesting when we have like a bank robbery story where the bank robbers essentially are non-violent. These aren't like really wanton kind of chaos kind of types here. They're smart. There's like a cleverness there. It's the fact that these guys can get away with it because they're ducks in a row. Now, mind you, we do see like moments of chaos still where they're not hurting anyone, but there's like moments like the first robbery, the first time they did it, the guy wasn't in the initial. He was in the plan B kind of pickup zone. He wasn't in like, hey, wait here, like around the corner, like behind the bank or something. He's like, no, we got to run. We got to run all the way across to option B to escape. So stuff like that. But there's like this great moment in the documentary where it's basically the bank robbers. They watched Heat, and it was like this realization of like, oh man, we've never seen really the bank robbery thing go that south before. Could that happen to us?
Right.
And Tiki, it does happen to them.
Ooh, okay.
So it's an intense heat situation. Basically, what ends up happening to them. So yeah, so that is a pretty decent sell there.
That's a good sell. That's a good sell.
Yeah, so it's a solid documentary. No real complaints about it. Just it's compared to some of the other documentaries I'll be talking about later. There might be some better ones, but yeah.
All right, Dragon. I'm gonna really yada past this next one because honestly, out of any movie that I've seen this year, this movie is like just definitively like in capital letters, just not Dragon's thing, but. We're talking Tuesday, Dragon. Do you want to see the death personified in the form of a weird talking parrot? Do you want to see that parrot have philosophical musings with Mary Dragon? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on.
Is it Mary Elizabeth Winstead?
No. It's Mary Louise. The
Parker? Julia Louis-Dreyfus?
Why am I thinking Mary? Jesus Christ. Yeah. Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Yeah, Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
That was a fucking brain fart. I'm so sorry. You want to see this parrot waxing philosophical and smoking weed and rapping with Julia Louis-Dreyfus's fictional daughter who has cancer and is dying of cancer? Do you want to see Julia Louis-Dreyfus get all defensive and try to kill the parrot so she can save her daughter? Tiki and Dragon? Does that sound like an appealing movie to you?
Well, Tiki, I don't want to see any of that.
I thought not. I think this movie is a really, really interesting art house film. Colby, look, I highly recommended it, but it's one of those things where it's like I was enjoying it in the moment. It's certainly different. It's not that great though. It's very pretentious. I think the best element of it by far is the actual effects on the parrot. Honestly, this might get a golden tiki for visual effects just based on that alone. I think the parrot just kind of walks that line where it is genuinely endearing, but also super off-putting at the same time. That's a really delicate balance to make. So yeah, there is really good stuff about this that I do really appreciate. But this is absolutely this is not your thing in the slightest, Dragon. All right. But a movie that I'm still kind of mixed on, I genuinely don't know how you would feel about this one, is The Bike Riders. And I am a little mixed on it myself. This movie's got a lot of Scorsese in it, just straight down to the narration, the kind of eclectic cast of characters who are very likable, but also very much, in that sort of seedy criminal underbelly. The whole premise of this, Dragon, is that Tom Hardy essentially starts a gang of bike riders, but they honestly kind of just start out as hobbyists, and it's honestly kind of like a bunch of dads who are hobbyists at the start. But this group of bike riders they gain notoriety, and the group grows too fast. And it's kind of the story of how this group of bike riders that was eventually, that was formed just on the basis of we like riding our bikes around, and yeah, we like racing dirt bikes and shit on the weekends and stuff like that. And it grew into a straight up gang, violent gang. And I do think that the way the movie shows that off, the way the movie shows that kind of slow progression, it's a slow paced movie. There's definitely elements of it that I'm kind of I kind of feel like they drag their feet on a little bit. Interestingly, Dragon, it's based on a photo article. So it's based on a book that was mostly comprised of photographs. And the photographer is in the movie, and he's played by one of my favorite up-and-comers, Mr. Mike Feist, a.k.a. the one of the main guys in Challengers, and also he was also in West Side Story. Mike Feist, I definitely have my eye on that guy. I'm going to be interested in anything that he does. Not the most memorable role here. Tom Hardy is definitely the most memorable role, and if you're interested in this movie at all, I would check it out for him. He's got a very complex arc. He's very much at the emotional center of seeing this gang kind of go down in flames. Like I said, there's a very Scorsese element to this. It's got a big ensemble of characters. It takes place over a number of years. There's almost kind of a Shakespearean rise and fall to it. I do think the weakest element of it is Austin Butler's character. And I think Austin Butler has a good screen presence here. I just think that his character is kind of specifically written to be sort of a mysterious, almost James Dean type. And I kind of feel while he's meant to be mysterious, he kind of comes across more as just sort of flat. And I don't really think that was the intention, but I just don't think they gave him enough to do. But who is in this movie that I haven't really liked before now, but I did really like her in this, is Jodie Comer. And she's one of the main narrators in this movie, and she has an accent, a Midwestern accent, that is going to divide the audience. I personally thought it was very compelling. I thought it was one of those I was kind of hanging on every word, almost specifically because of the accent. I also think that the opening of this movie is really killer, and it's got a fucking chef's kiss of a title reveal. So yeah, there's some really, really, really strong elements of this movie. I'm a little bit mixed on it because I do think it plots a little bit in the middle. I don't even really think the ending is all that satisfying. But it's a movie that kind of like lives and dies on its cast and its atmosphere, and I think it's got both of those in spades. So yeah, definitely a little bit of a mixed bag of a movie, but I still respect the hell out of it. So yeah, take that for what you will. All right. So next up, Dragon, we're gonna get into some TV. Dragon, I'm waiting. I'm honestly waiting on bated breath because I have thoughts. What did you think of The Bear season 3?
So there's season 3 again, without getting too into it because we might be talking about it soon. Highly anticipated season. Recently, I got caught up on it. I watched it. Saw the first 2 seasons. I really liked the first 2 seasons. I thought this season was good, but it did not eclipse the past 2 seasons. This season 3 is the quest for the Michelin star. That's kind of the imperative of season 3, and I think there's I think we took there was an issue. The issue at season 2, I think we kind of had to a lesser extent, but was still present when I think it feels like they dug themselves into a hole with 2, and then we're just kind of stuck with it in 3, where Carmi's love life is not really exciting.
I fucking hate the Claire character in this season. I'm just going to be straight up.
Well, it's not it's not much to hate. She's not. That's the problem. She's not in the season.
No, what I mean is that I fucking hate how all the characters like just treat her as like this absolute perfect like Christ-like figure, and how dare Carmi have any sort of negative word to say on her, and oh my god, she's just an angel. Like I fucking hate characters like that.
She didn't do anything wrong though.
No, Dragon, I understand that, but what I'm saying is that she was introduced in season 2, and I've just never really bought just how big of a fixture she is in this family. Yeah. I've just never bought it,
I'm with you there. I'm saying there is a disconnect with the Claire character for sure. I'm saying 3, it's depending on how you look at it, 3 minimized that by not having her there, but by the same token, also, it's like we're still like it's this problem with
endless scenes of Jeremy Allen White just pining over it, though.
It's just the problem of, and we literally have 2 Fack brothers.
Yes,
the two of the Facks, just like nothing but the facts, if you will. Basically, just like literally spelling it out for us. Like, there's such an easy solution to this. He just has to call her. And why?
That's my problem with the whole season, honestly, is I feel like the whole season, it's like, basically it's just like, just sign the damn contract or take the damn job.
Yeah.
There's so many elements of this season. Like, the fact that we don't even get a name for Natalie's baby by the end of this. Dragon, I am so unsatisfied with where we end up. It being the quest for the Michelin star, fine. I love the moment between Carmi and Marcus at the end of episode 2, for example. And at that moment, I really thought like, okay, this is going to be something. We're really going somewhere here. Episode 3 felt like a good return to form for the kind of like anxiety-driven storytelling of the show. And honestly, I love episode 6, the Tina episode, just because of the backstory of it all. That, to me, is probably my favorite episode of the season. Honestly, Dragon, everything else, I'm not going to lie, it was a little bit just straight up monotonous to sit through.
You mean he wasn't exciting, wasn't lighting the world on fire for you?
Look, we'll get into that episode when we get into it. I think that whole episode could have been like 10 minutes of another episode. I don't necessarily think we needed to spend up a whole 40 minutes in that hospital room. Like, basically, I feel like that episode, like, we said what we needed to say in that episode as far as the character development, and then it just kept going and going and going.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, but yeah,
Richie barely has anything to do this season, which frankly I found offensive.
we did give him some really good moments, though.
He has good moments, but he doesn't really have a storyline outside of like, oh no, my daughter thinks I'm lonely because I am lonely.
Do you think
Um,
he should end up with that hostess?
I don't know. Maybe I'm not really a shipper when it comes to the show.
Well, I'm asking because it seems like the whole lonely thing might have a payoff. That's why I'm
no, I
asking.
feel that. Dragon, I straight up hated the finale. I think outside of like the Joel McHale stuff, which was admittedly a good payoff, outside of that one element, I couldn't fucking stand the monologues we were getting by the real life celebrity chefs. It was all so fucking pretentious.
This is coming
Yeah,
from a foodie, folks.
Drag, I really think this show dropped the ball in the third season. I really think they got too big for their britches. I honestly think episode 1 is a good kind of encapsulation of that, where it's very much like when I saw episode 1, I was like, okay, this is either going to be like a really bold, innovative season, or it's going to be kind of like a pretentious style over substance season. And while the season did like again 2, 3, and 6 are the big highlights for me. Everything else I had significant problems with. So yeah. What do you think of John Cena, really quick?
I thought it was a delightful surprise.
I did too, honestly.
Well, there was a minute like the haunting thing's weird, but aside from that, he's a really delightful surprise.
I don't even think the haunting thing's weird.
No, it's nothing wrong. I'm just saying it was like, man.
I think
really
it's like authentically in the facts wheelhouse of like just a weird family tradition.
Yeah, it makes. I'm saying it's on brand for the facts. I'm just saying by
Right.
definition, it's kind of a weird thing. But it's not the point. It's just like it's a bit of a weird thing. But it's. So
right.
let me put it this way. It really the way this season ends really makes me think season 4 is going to be the ending.
Genuinely, I kind of hope so at this point, honestly.
I think it's not even just like a hoping or like based on like how the performance of the season was. I think just story in terms of like the width of story and just where they're going
Because
story
that
wise.
to be continued really pissed me off, considering that it really didn't feel like we developed much.
Well, that's what I'm saying. To be continued already makes me think, okay, you don't end like a season like that unless it's like the ending coming up. But it's that along with the fact that there's only so much direction story wise we can go, especially with the box that we've kind of put them in season 3. Of like, where else can they go? They're already very successful until
My
anyway.
prediction is season 3 is going to be about Carmi having to wrestle with whether or like I think the Marcus thing is going to come up in season 4. The whole thing where Marcus is an incredibly valued member of the team, but does he like financially, how much value is he adding? Like that kind of stuff. I think that one of the things in the review that's probably going to be addressed is I am guessing some kind of combination of like Carmi himself is brilliant, but the actual staff is a little bit of a mess, and he's going to have to kind of grapple with that, all while trying to deal with the whole trauma of the Joel McHale character, which again, that's another element. While I do think that the Joel McHale stuff is ironically paid off and probably the most frustrating episode of the season, it is good payoff. I'll give you that. But so yeah, look for more when Rohit and the two of us sit down for a Bear season 3 discussion. Should be an interesting time. But Dragon, yeah, I do definitely hope that once season 4 is out, I really hope that it kind of comes together as like, okay, that season, like there wasn't really a lot of actual forward momentum. Dragon, I couldn't tell you how frustrated I was with Sid's storyline. That to me was the big thing where it literally just felt like every episode was like going through the same sort of dilemma over and over and over again. And like, no, she's not going to tell Carmi now. It's not the right time, but it's never going to be the right time, Sid. And maybe we're supposed to be frustrated with that. I hope that season 4 resolves stuff like that. All right.
Okay.
Okay, next up, Dragon. Six Schizophrenic Brothers. I assume you watched this in Ren Fair, right? Based
Well,
on
I
who you
did
were.
not. Well, I did not watch Ren Fair, but I did watch this.
Okay. Yeah, this was heavy, man. This genuinely freaked me out. I mean, honestly, 2024, not a great not a great year for horror, even like very anticipated stuff like A Quiet Place Day 1. Um, you know, good movie, not a great horror movie. This is like, I'm not saying it's horror content, but I'm saying it genuinely scared me and kind of disturbed me to the bone more so than anything else that I have watched this year.
Yeah, this was so this was very strong, but I had here's the thing. So the story in itself, the cell, the premise, the whole the schizophrenic brothers in itself, and the whole way we're framing that. So episode one, very solid, very strong. It's like okay, but it really feels like over time, splitting the four episodes and just the way ID Discovery really kind of does these things. It feels like it's like kind of like a too many. I say characters in quotes, like too many subjects kind of issue here, where it's 12
I mean, I kind of
subjects.
think that's just like the nature of the story, though.
Yeah, but
I mean,
here's
it's kind of in the title, right?
yeah, but because look, yes, it's in the title. I'm just saying this the way in which like it's like we should be focusing on six, but instead it's a story of 12, and because of that, I think it drags in the middle a lot.
No, I hear you. Honestly, I kind of feel like this is another example where, although I am glad that it has 4 episodes instead of 3, I guess I'm not. I'm saying I'm glad of it because it does feel more like an actual series. I do think this could have been stronger just as a movie, though.
Yeah,
Like, honestly, as a
it's
movie, I think that the actual story behind it has the potential to be devastating in like a Dear Zachary kind of way.
oh, for sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, I do feel the ending's kind of a mess. I think in part because of the ID Discovery format. It's like it spoils a lot in like the whole coming up, kind of thing. But they don't say coming up, but you see like a few clips. Like we see like the big ending confrontation, like towards like the little credit scene of like one of the episodes where, and that ending confrontation, I feel was just kind of. This is gonna sound really harsh. It feels almost like I mean, I have a feeling it's real, but it does feel like the only thing it feels kind of like reality show manufactured to me. It's like a whole like we're sitting down on the family reunion. It's like that whole part where it just feels like and we're the way the camera moves in that scene where we have like like the basically one of the surviving sisters is going like, and I was there and you don't understand this, just like
Uh-huh.
it felt I'm not saying it was disingenuous, but it came across the way they shot
No,
that
I see.
very
I
disingenuous.
know what you're saying. Just the ID discovery of it all definitely isn't great. I don't. I totally know what you're saying. Just in general, with how they present their stuff, there is like an air of artificiality to it.
I guess just in the way they told this story, it's a very compelling story, but the way they told it, it really seems like things were doubling down. And ID likes to do this. They love the really dwell and really nail down like the horror factor of it. Like this is really terrible. We're hitting these first person accounts and they're very haunting, and we do deliver on that. But almost to a point of like I don't understand how these sisters, the other like the other remaining family members, the other six in total, how they got through it. I don't understand how a family endures this period because it feels like we kind of got a little lost in the shuffle. I'm saying there's like little bits here and there where they said like, and the mothers they separate them, and that's about as far as it went. Like, how do you walk past that? How do you walk that back? Like, how do
Uh-huh.
you go on? Because it sounds like murders and rapes are happening here. It's like, really?
No, I feel you. There's a little bit of a disconnect, and again, I feel like if it would have been more condensed into just like a feature film, I feel like we
Yeah.
could have lingered on that kind of stuff a little bit more instead of having to drag it out.
This feels like, and then there's the next kid.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so Ren Fair though, Dragon. This is basically like freaking Tiger King if Tiger King was actually like genuinely good and not super exploitative. It's got that same kind of energy where it's like, um, the characters in it are like larger than life, especially the King George character, who's like, this self-proclaimed multimillionaire king of the Renaissance Festival. He runs the Texas Ren Fair, which is one of the oldest and most successful Ren fairs in the country. And he is a dirty old man to the highest caliber, Dragon. He literally has someone on his staff who's just paid to manage his Tinder account. Yeah. And he ain't dating in his age bracket. Let's just say that much. But essentially, Dragon, this documentary is like, it's a three-way power struggle where George knows that he's going to retire soon. He knows he's not going to be around forever, and he wants to make sure that the Ren Fair is left in the best hands. And there's two options. There is a guy who has been at George's side for a long time, for decades. He's basically like the co-manager of the fair. But the problem with him is that he doesn't necessarily have a killer instinct. When conflicts come up, he tends to kind of back down. He's really into the fair. He's he's very passionate about it, but he, like, as far as like the actual leadership style, you can kind of tell that he's a little bit docile when it comes to that. And then there's Louis. And Louis is a hell of a character, Dragon. He is the main kettle corn vendor at the fair. And his family is loaded, and they want to buy the fair from George. And Louis is very much the antagonist. The documentary very much almost kind of has like a King of Kong quality to it. And Louis is very much the Billy Mitchell character in that equation. He even looks a little bit like Billy Mitchell. He wears his hair in a ponytail and stuff. Yeah, Dragon, I honestly think you'd have a ball with this thing. It's only 3 episodes long, but each episode it's almost kind of like a trilogy. It almost kind of feels like a 3-act play or something. It's really well produced. I do think that there is an air of artificiality to it to a certain extent. But I also just think that it's just very well edited. And apparently, I haven't looked into any of this guy's other stuff, the director, but apparently he's pretty well respected in the documentary community. And his whole style is kind of like going into these really niche, kind of weird subcultures and stuff like that. So I'm actually interested in checking out some more of this guy's stuff. So it's definitely a little bit trashy. It's not like the most like intellectually stimulating thing you're ever going to watch, but I would still give it a high recommend just based on the character drama of it all, Dragon. I really think you'd enjoy this one. Okay, so next up we have Sweet Tooth. I still need to get into it. I'm waiting for the day where I'm actually in the headspace for it, but tell us about season 3, Dragon.
Well, again, headspace, you don't mean like you're not afraid of anything in Sweet Tooth, right?
No. I just mean like fantasy isn't really my thing, just in general.
Well, Tiki, it's not really like, I don't think it's fantasy in the way you're thinking about it. It's more post-apocalyptic.
I get that.
Anyway, yeah. So Sweet Tooth. So this is the final season. This is the ending of the story. Basically, a story told in 3 acts. Ultimately, I highly recommend it. It's very Netflix so far. I mean, and we'll see how Umbrella Academy does it coming up in August. But they've had quite the knack for adapting, kind of like the graphic novels and kind of the niche limited series, which Sweet Tooth falls into. This season, Gus, he's trying to find his mom, and they uncover the source of the sickness, which has been the big whole status quo shifting, apocalyptic event that hit the show in the first place. This is a big season where we get answers to some questions. Of course, the big thing with the sickness and the big sell of the show, I want to say it was coincidental at first, and then it just kind of became very relevant, was the whole parallels to the pandemic. That was just kind of a thing Sweet Tooth kind of lucked into, I believe, because I believe Sweet Tooth, I think, came out in 2020. I think. It could be wrong.
Sounds right. It sounds right.
So I think what happened is like they had it in the can, and then basically it was just kind of timed out to be. That's why everyone was watching Sweet Tooth, because one, everything else is on hiatus with Stranger Things, and while that was, anyway. But yeah, so the boy's been on a journey by this point. You know, he's grown, he's evolved. You know, it's you know, I think they brought it home really nicely. The climax is very much a philosophical one, which I appreciated. You know, it's not whammo blammo action. It's very much kind of a kind of an examination of where we stand by the end of things, and has a satisfying conclusion to the series. And again, I can't say enough nice things about Sweet Tooth. Really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up for me, we got Monsters at Work season 2. Dragon,
Yeah.
what the hell happened between seasons? How the hell did this get so good?
Right. So yeah. So you liked it then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say it's like one of the best things that Pixar's ever did. I mean, I still have some issues with it. I still don't really like Fritz, and the sidekick character that they strapped him with is
I
like,
know. I
yeah,
didn't like. I didn't like him.
yeah, he was very annoying. But no, you know, Johnny Worthington is the is the Rick Swiker style villain. You are absolutely on point with that comparison. He was
Yeah.
great. It's wonderful to have Mike and Sully in every episode and actually
Hmm.
feel like they're plot relevant. That's awesome. I do think that Mindy Kaling is still a little annoying, but at least I feel like her plot is a little more compelling, and it isn't just being clingy best friend. I like her arc, especially like as we get into the second half of the season. I think Tyler is a lot more relatable in the season than he like
Hmm.
basically in season 1, it wasn't like he wasn't relatable, but he was just kind of like a blank slate everyman to a certain extent. And I feel like in this season, the actual conflict with him is a lot more interesting.
I just love
Um,
that I love that this season we gave him like an actual, like a really good, dilemma, and that, well, he doesn't,
yeah,
he
totally.
doesn't have to be. There was another path the whole time. He just never considered.
Now I do think that the actual like lesson of the season, the whole like like what your life path isn't necessarily going to be what you were picturing it to be, and that's okay. And you can still very much like shine in this new area that you've found for yourself. I feel like it's a little bit like we're kind of just playing the hits from Monsters University, including playing the hit of bringing back Johnny Worthington. but
Yeah, but
that's
yeah.
okay. I feel like it's like poetry; it rhymes to a certain extent. Yeah, man. I mean, I truly did not really care for the first season all that much. I thought it had a couple fun moments, a couple decent episodes, but by and large, it felt like pretty disposable Disney Plus content. This is not disposable. Like if they make a Monsters Inc. 3, they're gonna have to address some of the stuff that goes on in this season, as far as like just from a sheer world building level.
Something
So yeah,
interesting.
I'm very, very impressed with this.
Technically, Disney animating Pixar on this.
Ah, interesting.
So
Interesting.
apparently the first season was like this too. I just get, but our Prep and Landing guys were the showrunners on season 2 here, so that was.
That actually makes a lot of sense for why it was so good. I mean,
Now
those
I
guys
have one question.
they know how to make workplace comedy.
Now I have one question for you.
Okay.
Okay, so I love season 2 except for the finale. How did you come down on the finale?
No, yeah, no, I feel you. I feel you. Again, it's kind of like one of those things where by the time the finale hit, I already pretty much, it was just kind of like sort of felt like it was getting to its inevitable conclusions. It seems like finales not being great are kind of a theme this month with TV shows.
Mm.
So I'm with you on that.
But really, look, did you appreciate the gag with Frankie Rigatoni?
Yes, yes,
You
definitely.
gotta admit, just like we had the whole, it feels like the whole reason we had Henry Winkler in the show was from the Do the Fonz and Pixar.
Exactly,
Just it's
exactly.
the whole gag. Just
And he was, by and large, one of the more annoying characters for that 2 seasons. But yes, that gag was a good
so you
payoff.
and I are just gonna differ on Fritz, man. I love Fritz.
Yeah, we are going to differ on Fritz because
Plus, man, I tell you, what's really
I
funny.
have worked with people like Fritz, so maybe that's where I'm coming down on him. Where it's like he very much feels like a coworker I would not want to have because that level of enthusiasm is just exhausting.
Diggy, I recently finished Henry Winkler's audiobook. Okay, so he's reading that whole book. And man, he is again. It just sounds like it's kind of like Fritz reading it to you. Henry Winkler's just a really nice guy.
Well, Little Blue is in your corner in regards to Fritz. He
I mean,
says, I have never found Fritz annoying, which is fair. That's totally fair. You know,
yeah.
I think I always like to preach the film is subjective thing, but especially comedy. I think comedy is one of the most subjective things there is. So I will never judge someone for not gelling with a comedic character like I do.
Yeah, you're never gonna hit the Martin Short button from We're Back at Dinosaur Story, cause that's comedy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh God. Okay, let's see. Next up, we have Eric. All right, genuinely, I'm kind of curious. It's such a nondescript title of a show, Dragon, but I keep seeing it on my Netflix feed. So please,
Did you watch the trailer for this?
no.
All right, so Eric is interested. I hyped this up last month because I was in the midst of watching Eric, but I wasn't going to be able to finish it, and it coincidentally came out again, very suspiciously so, around the same time the Jim Henson documentary came out. So Eric is a 6-episode miniseries that's from the UK. Stars Benedict Cumberbatch essentially as a gritty Jim Henson. So
Oh
the
my
show.
God. Oh my God. Dragon doesn't have that kind of kidding energy. 'Cause
That's
kinda
what
like
that's what I'm about to get to. Yeah,
okay,
it's
okay.
but you're right. Basically, it's kind of like it's a trickier version of kidding, where it doesn't. It's nowhere near as good as kidding. I'll tell you that right now. Okay, it's nowhere near as good as kidding. But here's the thing: there's a good show here, but there's a problem that scratches your old problematic itch. There's there's I don't know if a tone problem is necessarily the right word, but it's more of like there are two shows in one here, and because there are two shows in
Mhm.
one, that mixes the tone. So it's a mixed bag because of the two shows you have. Okay, the compelling show that you're sold on that you want to see that is kind of kidding adjacent. You have Vincent, the Benedict Cumberbatch character, again, our gritty Jim Henson, basically works on Sesame Street or a parody of Sesame Street, embodies the very few negative qualities. Like we're expanding on the very few negative qualities of Jim Henson from real life, where Jim Henson, a little distant with the kids because he's always working and marital troubles. So basically, we're taking that as the acorn of the idea, and we're kind of expanding that to see you have this really, creative, lauded kind of puppeteer top of his game. It's funny. I think they mentioned Jim Henson in the show a few times. It's kind of funny. Um, but essentially, this guy's a troubled marriage, because they're always fighting all the time. The kid doesn't, he's overhearing all of it. He's not thrilled about it. His son wants to create a puppet for the show named Eric, who's a big kind of suit puppet, like Sweetums, or, if you will. And basically, the father, being kind of a bad, distant father, he doesn't walk him to school. Little kid, like 8-year-old kid, doesn't walk him to school in 80s New York. 80s crime ridden New York City, and the boy goes missing.
Oh God.
So
Mhm.
that's the story. That's the compelling story. That's the good story. That's your sell. Episode
So
one's all
essentially, if the flashback from Helga on the couch goes terribly wrong,
yes.
okay.
No. See, it's actually very apt. It's exactly perfect. Basically, so
Who's
take
gonna
that.
take me to preschool?
If Big Bob was a puppeteer and it was like if it was like grade school and not preschool, that would be it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, so that's episode one. So episode one is all about that, and that's your sell. You'd love episode one. After that, it's when we get into the thing where there's another compelling story, but the problem is should not, and does not really connect with this main story at all. There's an A plot and there's a B plot, and never the twain should meet, it feels like. Okay, you have a cop character who's assigned to find the kid, and he starts doing that, and then we just go in this whole subplot of like it's like basically we're examining the gay district in the 80s.
Oh,
It's
weird.
like this. There's this
I mean, that
nightclub.
sounds interesting in its own right,
It
but
is,
yeah.
and it's a good. I want to be clear. I think it's well told, but it's this thing that
Uh-huh.
has nothing to do with our main plot. Has no business being in this show.
You know what that reminds me of? You're probably not familiar with this author, but one of the authors I'm really into right now is Haruki Murakami, and he actually does have a tendency to write like dual narratives where it's very interesting stuff taking place in both narratives, but they don't ever really come together except symbolically. So it
Yeah,
kind of sounds like it's a little bit of that at play.
that
Like not his style, but definitely his kind of structure.
yeah, probably. It's just this B plot, the detective, like there's a very, very thin causal link to the kid's story, but let's just put it this way. The detective doesn't really ultimately find the kid, so it's kind of pointless at the end of it, okay? So it's just like a whole thing of like, man, that was a lot of nothing. Where it's like he unearths this really interesting conspiracy about the homelessness crisis, and that connects to like like the homosexual like kind of nightclub that basically is like a lot of crimes going through and stuff. Like that's interesting. Again, has nothing to do with one or the other with those two plot points. The two things I want to highlight though, best aspect of the show, I think. Vincent is hallucinating his son's puppet idea. So you have Eric the puppet, who is voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch and is this awesome towering like puppet that is like he's imagining him, and we see like everyone's looking at him like he's crazy when he's like talking to this imaginary friend. Who is this awesome looking puppet. And the idea is the boy sees his father when he argues with his mother as a monster, so that's what the puppet is. And the whole gist is like Vincent wants to get that puppet on the air. That's his imperative. I'm going to get this puppet on the air so my son who's run away will come home.
Uh-huh.
That's a great sell. Again, in the marketing, that's all you're being sold. You don't have any of this other B plot stuff.
Right.
And lastly, one thing, there's this weird thing where I think unintentionally they're sending a really bad message out there too in this show that the homeless people are bad.
I was kind of wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this weird thing where it really feels like in the show like we're saying that homeless people are a lost cause and they're bad, and it just feels like it's a bloodied moral there.
I don't like that message.
I mean, admittedly, there's a bit of gray in the way they show it by the end. Like, essentially, there is a good homeless man character, but it does feel like, man,
does he help the main character by letting him use his smartphone to Google stuff?
Well, it's the 80s, Tiki, so there are no smartphones.
I know.
Yeah. So you see what I mean, though? There's a lot of good aspects to this show, but it's
sounds like a mixed bag for sure.
And it's so weird because both plots aren't bad. It just feels like they just should not be in the same pot.
Interesting. I honestly think I might enjoy it more than you just because I feel like I'm a little bit more accepting of stuff like that. For example, the movie Nope. I actually think that the Stephen Yeun stuff is some of the most compelling stuff in the whole movie. The Gordy's Home stuff. I don't understand how people can watch that movie and be like, well, the Gordy's Home stuff is just boring. It's like, no, it is like it might not connect to the main plot like you want it to, but it's not fucking boring. Anyways.
Yep. Anyway, it's 6 episodes, so it's a digestible watch.
All right, so next up for me, we got Smiling Friends Season 2. Dragon, I understand Smiling Friends isn't your thing. I get it. But I gotta tell you, man, I think Season 2 is a fucking masterpiece. There's maybe 2 episodes out of the 8 that I think are really good, but not quite like absolute bangers. I think the other 6 are just genuinely awesome, just insanely quotable. The character of Mr. Boss this season has just been elevated to just an absurd degree of like, he is maybe one of my all-time favorite comedic animated characters in an adult animated show because he's just so unhinged and you just never know what he's going to do. The mix of multimedia in this season is just insane. We get like video game animation, we get stop motion, we get live action integration, we get let's see what else. We get rotoscoping. Every episode is just like an absolute treasure trove of cool animation styles colliding together. And I actually think that like the first season is a little bit more just like straight up randomness, and this season feels a little bit more put together. Like Smiling Friends is never going to be a show that you watch for the lore in the same way that you watch something like Rick and Morty for the lore. But I do think that there is some connective tissue there. For example, the slow mental deterioration of Mr. Boss and what's going on with him behind the scenes, stuff like that. That I do think are compelling, and I'm genuinely curious to see where they go with it in season 3. Also, Dragon, I'm sure you probably heard of this, I'm guessing, but Doug Walker himself has a very memorable cameo this season. So yeah, I don't know, Dragon. I totally get, like, because I know that like animation style is one of the big sticking points with you and animated series, and honestly, with the first season, I totally get it. But honestly, I think the first season has some real banger episodes as well, just from the writing department. Still has some great mixed multimedia elements to it, and then I think the second season, the animation quality is just improved dramatically, and also the second season, just the writing is very on point as well. So yeah, I think the second season just absolutely knocked it out of the park. All right, and so Dragon, I'm going to be straight up. I did not actually make it all the way through It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia season 6, but I did make it through season 5, so I'll just talk about season 5 here. And season 5, it's my favorite so far. I think it's great. I think that there's just so much good stuff here. Honestly, I think Dennis in particular is just super memorable here. We have the Dennis system, which might be my favorite episode of the show thus far. Let's see. We have the original home of the kitten Mittens, which is iconic. I think Mac and Dennis break up is really great. I think let's see, the waitress is getting married definitely has some high stakes. The gang hits the road I really like, specifically because of the whole premise of like they spend the whole episode trying to get out of Philly and they never actually do. So yeah, a lot of really great episodes in this. And I really think that by this point in the season, or by this point in the series, I should say, I really think that the series is kind of like at a high point right now. So yeah, just it's kind of hard to say much about these Always Sunny seasons, except for it's definitely some more kind of current, like, topical humor here. Like, for example, the like some of the earlier episodes are the gang exploits the mortgage crisis and the Great Recession, obviously pretty timely for 2009. So yeah, definitely once again kind of like upping the ante here, and I'm excited to get into season 6. I have heard that the series as a whole kind of peaks around season 7. That's honestly one of the reasons why I kind of slowed down a little bit with Always Sunny and started watching some other stuff. But I'm still very much on board. The Dennis system in particular, I think, is a freaking masterpiece of television. I mean, that whole episode is just top to bottom. It's just classic.
Yeah, I don't know about it peaking at 7. I know there's an episode in, I think it's season 9 or 10. It's somewhere between 9 and 12, honestly. It's one of the later seasons. There's an episode called Charlie Worked. It's amazing.
Okay.
Like that, I think you're really going to like. That's one of my favorites. I love the Charlie Work episode.
All right. So moving on, we just have some catch up, and there's not much here in terms of catch up. It's definitely the lightest thing of the month for us. All right, so Dragon, I finally saw Quiz Lady.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know what you were expecting. I pretty much reacted to it exactly how you expected me to. I think it's really great. I think Will Ferrell's got a great performance. Honestly, I kind of feel like my one nitpick with it is I sort of wish that instead of all the actual quiz show stuff taking place in the third act of the movie, I kind of wish that it would have started it around the halfway point in the movie. I think the stuff with getting the dog back from the mobsters, well, I do like the fact that the mobsters are just like these delightful, like, like dog owners at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I still think it's a little bit long-winded. Doesn't necessarily need to be as big of an element in the movie as it was. That being said, I mean, let's just give it up for Miss Sandra. Oh my friend.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean,
Sandra, oh my God.
what a fucking class act of an actress she is. And I will even give my credit where credit's due to Aquafina. This is exactly the type of role that I wish Aquafina would do more of.
I told you.
Aquafina, I first saw her in the movie The Farewell, which genuinely is about the most anti-Aquafina movie there is, as far as like her performance is very grounded, very down to earth, not things that you associate with the typical Aquafina performance. And I do really like the role reversal here. I really like how Aquafina in this movie is the more kind of self-serious, down-to-earth of the two. And then Sandra Oh is just living it up. I think the age gap between the two of them being 10 years is perfect. I think it kind of allows for, like, they're still close as sisters, but there's also, like, you know, it makes sense why the personalities would be so different. Yeah, I really think this is a big win.
Oh, what did you think about Evil Ken Jennings?
Like a little bit more of Jason Schwartzman being a swarmy jerk, but you know what? We've seen plenty of that over the years, anyways. And what screen time he does have, he's great in. So I'll take it.
Like Evil Ken Jennings.
Yeah, Little Blue, the Paul Rubens scene that was definitely funny as well.
Right,
that was definitely a good payoff. I just think that Dragon, I never thought about it before, but Alan Cummings and Paul Rubin do look suspiciously alike, do they not?
Yeah, no, they do.
Like,
do.
now that the movie has pointed it out, I can't unsee it.
But what do you think, man? Is that as the last Paul Rubens thing? Like, isn't that nice?
I think it's so sweet, honestly. Right? Honestly.
Yeah.
And the fact that I love the fact that like he's kind of confused about the situation. He's not really all the way down for it, but he's like, all right, whatever, I'll do it. All right. Okay, mystery movie, Dragon. What do you got?
Godzilla -1.
Okay. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. All right.
All right, so this deserved its praise.
Yeah, hell yeah, it did.
I'd have to reevaluate to see if it's like number one of the year worthy, but it's up there. It's great. It is. It's great. I will admit, I was a little worried about it when I saw the first iteration of Godzilla, when he's smaller and he's on land.
Yeah, but that's intentional build-up, my friend.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, I saw that as it went on. I'm just saying, it's like, think about it, Tiki. You going like, oh, the effects are amazing on Godzilla.
No, I hear you. And
you go and it's like, and I'm thinking, oh no, was it overhyped? It's like, look at that.
Me, I think the big scene that really showcases the effect is the boat scene about halfway through.
Well, yeah.
That scene again is just fucking instantly iconic.
Well, again,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
The sell of this Godzilla movie is basically, what if we took a Jaws approach to Godzilla? That was
exactly.
Yeah. Like Godzilla's like a force of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I love the idea of the whole kamikaze pilot getting cold feet and he's traumatized by Godzilla. Like, that's great, and I like that we're taking our time with him. Apparently, the director of this film, I read a little blurb somewhere. This director, he was very influenced by Miyazaki and Spielberg, and it definitely shows in all the best ways.
Oh, very much so, especially in some of the stuff that they do with the characters in the third act that is admittedly pretty telegraphed, but still satisfying.
Like the unofficial, this director's like the love child of those men.
Right.
For what he's done here, he did a really good job. The only gripe I have is I do question the girlfriend's survival.
You know what? I hear you.
I mean, it's nice.
You know what it reminded me of a little bit? It reminded me of the ending of War of the Worlds a little bit.
Well, a better version of that. But yeah.
I feel like it earns that ending way more than War of the Worlds does.
Yep, just like, son, there you are.
Right. It's not like I literally saw you run headfirst into a giant fireball or anything.
Did you see me, Dad? I was wearing my big boy pants. Did you see me? I ran real fast. My arms like this, just like you taught me. That's very good, son. Do you like that I'm taller than you?
But
No, let's
honestly, the way
downplay
that
that.
I read the ending here is basically that her surviving is kind of like an act of God almost.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And
So
I kind of feel like it's cathartic given everything that the lead character has been through.
you're not just an act of God, an act of Godzilla.
Yes, Dragon. Thank you. All right, moving on. The first Omen, I'll make this quick because I know it's very much not your thing. I know you're never going to watch it, but for what it's worth, I think this is a very unnecessary movie. Like, I don't think anyone was like clamoring, like, we need to see how Damien was born. Oh my God. But
Well,
for
it was
what
a
it's
night with a
worth,
lot of
it's
wine.
yeah. For what it's worth, it is done well. This movie's very atmospheric. It honestly kind of feels like a throwback to like 70s exorcism movies. Not nearly as scary, but still kind of has that mood and atmosphere. I don't know, man. I'd give this like a solid 7 out of 10. It's nothing groundbreaking. I think by far the best element of it is Ralph Ineson, of course, our Galactus and Dragon. Ralph Ineson, every time this dude pops up on screen, he just has such a commanding air of authority to him. And that's exactly why I think he's going to make a really good Galactus. And I'm really excited about that. I mean, he feels like just a 70s like disgruntled preacher who's been disgraced from the church in the most raw, realistic way. I really, really liked his performance. Other than that, I felt the movie was fine. I think the horror elements are there. It is pretty creepy at parts, but there's nothing that'll really stay with me. I think probably the biggest scare is just a straight up like, hey, remember when we did this in the first movie? Remember, it's all for you, Damien? Let's just do that again. So wholly unnecessary, but for what it's worth, it is done well. That's all I'll say about it. All right. Remembering Gene Wilder, Dragon.
Okay, so again, there's a little. It's really hard to place this one because I enter the thing with like the Hitman, the whole like release window thing, because this is like a film festival thing. I put it in the catch up because either way, even when it did come out this year, I think it came out technically like in like the limited like release window.
You know what? I'm having a hard time with Hundreds of Beavers this year because technically that movie was like in film festivals as early as like 2022, but it did get a wide release this year. So I hear you on that struggle.
So, however you want to quantify this, let's just for argument's sake say it did come out this year, which I'm inclined to believe it did. This is like so far this is the top documentary of the year, man. This is top tier. I mean the Jim Henson thing was good, and I have nothing against. I really do like that, but that did have a little bit of style to it with like how they filmed it. But this man
of this one versus the Jim Henson one is I feel like the Jim Henson one is like I know there's probably stuff in there that I don't know, but by and large, I know so much about Jim Henson that I kind of feel like it's just going to go over some stuff that I already know. Gene Wilder, I know much less about. Like, I obviously know his most iconic roles, but I know very little about the actual man.
Trust me, you watch this movie, you're gonna fall in love with the man.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it.
They used his audiobook, which I've read, which I've I guess read / listened to. It's his audio. There's a lot of his audiobook in this. So basically, you have a documentary with him as the framing device, so it's in his own words to an extent. I mean, there are like it's not completely archival. I'm just saying, like he's basically kind of narrating a little bit of his own life, which is good and kind of trippy. It's really trippy seeing the younger years of Gene Wilder. That's the complete blind spot you'll have. Just wow, you had no idea he was in it that early, and like he looked really different when he was younger too. It's a great deep dive on the man. It's a retrospective on the career and just how beloved he was, and the fact that he just he committed in these roles. Like you forget that you will believe a man can fly. You will believe a man can love a sheep. like legitimately. And I mean, I don't just mean like, okay, ha ha ha, man and sheep. But it's like, no, like you believe this man loves this sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so and that's incredibly hard to do. In case anyone's wondering. So I there's some really heartbreaking stuff towards the end, man. In the final years, I'll tell you that. Like, there's a little bit of like just a heartbreaking, not in the sense of like there's like the rise and fall of a Hollywood star, but just the fact that like he held in there for a long time. I think he passed away in like 2016.
Yeah, I remember when he died. Yeah, it was a big deal.
So that's the thing. So when so I'm saying like towards the end there were some rough years. So they get into a little bit of that, but I tell you, there's only one criticism I have on this. It's not all their fault. I'm just saying it's like a missed opportunity. It's a shame they get Alan Tudyk in on this as one of the talking heads. He had a lot of like fun talking heads, and a lot of people just kind of that were like doing interviews. It just feels like I know they went with the people that Gene Wilder worked with, but Alan Tudyk loves Gene Wilder. And I still attest, like I'll admit, after watching The Bear, yes, Jeremy Allen White as well, too. Yes, but
and it's
still,
not just because he looks like him either. He genuinely has some of the mannerisms.
he does. So look, admit yes, but still, Alan Tudyk, man, he's my go-to for a Gene Wilder, and it feels like that guy. He adores him, and he sounds like he embodies him. He really should have. They should have reached out to him for this.
Mm.
He's a huge fan of the guy, and he's an actor. Plus, he's played him like an animation. So I mean, come on. Anyway, but yeah, this was a wonderful documentary.
TV Glow. This was done by the same director as We're All Going to the World's Fair. Very much not your thing, Dragon. Very art house horror. It's barely a horror movie until like the last 15 minutes, where it just fucking slaps you in the face. And the thing is, it's not violent or anything, or even like, there's no monsters. It literally, the monster in this movie is just the passage of time. And it slaps you in the face with like, hey, if you don't live your authentic self while there's still a chance, you're gonna be fucked. The ending of the movie is haunting. Unfortunately, this movie stars Justice Smith, and Justice Smith has never really turned in a performance that's been very convincing to me. I think he does a really good job with the finale of this movie, but I think every other scene in the movie, he's still kind of like his usual kind of awkward, mumbling self, which is part of the character, but it's still like not exactly like the type of performance I'm going to gravitate to. And it's also just weird seeing him in a movie that's by this director, considering like, well, he's not necessarily like an A-list person, he's been in big movies, right? He was in Detective Pikachu, he was in Dungeons and Dragons, so he's in there as far as like Hollywood celebrities go. And We're All Going to the World's Fair was just so authentically not a Hollywood movie. So his presence just kind of throws off everything. But I will say this movie does play on the idea of nostalgia. It plays on the idea of like being obsessed with old TV shows. Like, imagine Dragon, like, how like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark and stuff used to be like super terrifying when we were kids, but then when we look back on them when they're on Netflix or whatever, we're like, oh my god, like what the fuck were we thinking? There is moments in this movie that very much reflect on that sensation, and it's great. I don't even think it's going to be like in my top movies of the year, but I do think the ending is very effective. Ultimately, I'm a little mixed on it, mostly because of the Justice Smith thing. But again, that ending, man, that ending is fucking harrowing. It's honestly one of the more terrifying, like, passage of time messages I've ever seen in a movie. All right, so really quick, Dragon, because I do have to get out of here soon. Best and worst, what do you got?
Best, oh man, best is kind of a toss-up because, I mean, there's Inside Out 2, there's Hitman, and there's the Gene Wilder documentary. I think, I mean, I might give it to Hitman. I mean, I loved Inside Out too, though. I mean, Hitman's
really, Hitman over Inside Out?
No, I can't give it to Hitman. I'm going to give it to Inside Out too.
All right, I'm glad you did that because I cannot, in good consciousness, give it to Inside Out over Thelma. I'm going Thelma, but Inside Out is definitely a good contender. For best. Worst, I really don't think I have a worst, but if I had to pick one, it'd probably be Tuesday. Just because definitively it's like I respect what the movie's going for, but even I didn't really actively enjoy watching it. So yeah. But overall, Dragon, I respect it, if not liked. And Tuesday is definitely in that kind of like respect more than I actively like category. All right, so big thanks to Keeper Colby, Miscellaneous, Little Blue, and Kogias for joining us in the comments. And well, folks, we waxed on long enough, and it's time to put the pen down. Until next time, when we return for another fitting chapter in our
Movie Memoirs!